Good afternoon. Welcome to our San Francisco Board of Supervisors meeting for December 9th, 2014. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes, Madam President. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos present. Supervisor Breed.
Here.
Breed present. Supervisor Campos.
Present.
Campos present. Supervisor Cohen.
Present.
Cohen present. Supervisor Farrell.
Present.
Farrell present. Supervisor Kim. Kim present. Supervisor Marr. Marr not present. Supervisor and President Tang.
Present.
Tang present. Supervisor Wiener.
Present.
Wiener present. Supervisor Yee.
Present.
Yee present. Madam President, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, can you please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, Madam Clerk, are there any communications?
Yes, Madam President. We have a communication. As the Board is aware, pursuant to the actions taken by this body on November 18th and the effective resignation of President Chu, we have a vacancy in the office of District 3 and welcome to the dais President Katie Tang to fill the remainder of the term until January 8th, 12 noon.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And now, colleagues, you've received the minutes from the October 28th and November 4th board meetings. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, colleagues, if there are no changes, then without objection, then the meeting minutes stand, subject to general public comment. All right. And Madam Clerk, can you please read the consent calendar?
Items 1 through 4 comprise the consent calendar. These items are considered routine. If a member objects, an item may be removed and considered separately.
All right, roll call vote, please.
On items 1 through 4, Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed. Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr. Marr, absent. There are 9 ayes.
Thank you. The item passes. The consent calendar passes. And Madam Clerk, item number 5, please.
Item 5 is an ordinance to appropriate approximately $8.1 million from reserves to the Department of Building Inspection for fiscal year 2014 through 15 for site development and a conditional loan for an office project on Van Ness Avenue.
All right, colleagues, seeing that the House has changed, can we take a roll call vote on this item, please?
On item 5, Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed. Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. There are 10 ayes.
The measure is adopted. Item 6, please.
Item 6 is an ordinance to approve and authorize the Director of Property to execute a conditional land disposition and acquisition agreement with Goodwill SF Urban Development for property located at 1500 through 1580 Mission Street with an anticipated cost of $327 million, requiring prevailing wage pay, the implementation of a local business enterprise utilization program, compliance with the city's local hire and first source hiring ordinance, and exempting the project from contracting requirements in the administrative code, and approving the developer, architect, and general contractor without a competitive process.
Same House, same call. The item is adopted unanimously. Item 7, please.
Item 7 is an ordinance to authorize the Municipal Transportation Agency to include in any contract for security services it executes within the next year after issuing a competitive solicitation a provision that requires the payment of prevailing wages by both the contractor and subcontractors to any individual providing security services under the contract.
Colleagues, any comments on this item? Same House, same call. The item is adopted unanimously. Item 8, please.
Item 8 is an ordinance to amend the administrative code to comprehensively revise the local business and Non-Discrimination in Contracting Ordinance, Chapter 14B, to codify the transfer of implementation and enforcement of Chapter 14B from the Human Rights Commission to the City Administrator and Contract Monitoring Division, require the mayor to annually set an overall citywide LBE participation goal of not less than 40% of the value of upcoming contracts, to increase the LBE certification size thresholds for small and micro LBEs, to increase the bid discount allowed to SBA LBEs on contracts between $10,000 and $10 million, to require Administrative Code Chapter 56 development agreements to include an LBE utilization plan and be subject to certain Chapter 14B provisions, and to authorize various other changes in Chapter 14B.
Same House, same call. This item is finally adopted unanimously. Item 9, please.
Item 9 is an ordinance to amend the Administrative Code to clarify the requirement for municipal electric power service to city departments, facilities, and new developments.
Same House, same call. This item is finally passed unanimously. Next item, please.
Item 10 is an ordinance to amend the Planning Code to allow exemptions above the height limit for mechanical equipment in hospitals that are legal non-compliant structures with regard to height and making the environmental findings.
Same House, same call. This item is finally adopted unanimously. Item 11, please.
Item 11 is an ordinance to amend the Planning Code to amend the 3rd Street Alcohol Restricted Use District to allow alcoholic beverage control type 23, the small beer manufacturer licenses, and making environmental findings.
Same House, same call. This item is adopted unanimously. Thank you. Next item, please.
Item 12 is an ordinance to amend the administrative and police codes on the limitations and restrictions on criminal history inquiries for employment and housing.
Same House, same call. This item is finally passed unanimously. Item 13.
Item 13 is an ordinance to modify the requirements of the Administrative Code on the contracting process for the Van Ness Bus Rapid Transit Project.
Same House, same call. This item is adopted unanimously. Next item.
Item 14 is an ordinance to amend the Administrative Code to require certain city contractors and subcontractors with 20 or more employees to submit an equal pay report depicting the compensation paid to employees, establishing and setting forth the duties of the Equal Pay Advisory Board.
Same House, same call. This item is finally passed unanimously without objection. Next item.
Item 15 is an ordinance to amend the Administrative Code to revise the binding financial policy under the financial provisions of the Charter, Section 9.120, regarding required funding levels of the General Reserve, and to update provisions regarding the Rainy Day Reserve Fund.
Thank you. And this item, just as a reminder, requires a 2/3 vote. Same House, same call. Without objection, this item finally passes unanimously. Item 16. Oh, I'm sorry. That one passes on first reading. Item 15. Item 16, please.
Item 16 is an ordinance to amend the Business and Tax Regulations Code to authorize methods of electronic payment for parking, reduced parking ticket requirements, increase small lot exemptions, and amend the valet parking requirements, and to clarify revenue control equipment requirements.
All right. Same House, same call. Without objection, this item passes on first reading unanimously. Item 17.
Item 17 is a resolution to retroactively authorize the Department of the Environment to accept and expend a $300,000 grant from the California Energy Commission to accelerate the adoption of alternative fuel vehicles in the city from June 30th, 2014 through September 30th, 2016.
Same House, same call. Without objection, this item passes on first reading. Next item, please.
Item 18 is a resolution to retroactively authorize the Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development to accept and expend an approximate $443,000 Innovation Fund research contract grant from the U.S. Department of Treasury Internal Revenue Service from September 30th, 2014 through December 21st, 2016.
Same House, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted unanimously. And Madam Clerk, if you can call items 19 through 21 together, please.
Items 19 through 21 are the resolutions authorizing the city to participate in the renewable energy programs, the California First, Home Energy Renovation Opportunity, Renewable Energy Financing Program, Joint Powers Agreement Amendment, and the statewide Communities Development Authority Open PACE Program to create administrative process to accept applications and levy assessments.
Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you. Colleagues, today in front of us are three resolutions that I am co-sponsoring with Mayor Lee to restart Green Finance SF here in San Francisco. It's a project that I've been working on for the past, for over a year at this point in time, and really picking off what Supervisor Marr had done in her previous mayoral administration with Gavin Newsom. As you may recall, last year we unanimously approved legislation to have our Department of the Environment take the necessary steps to restart Green Finance SF, which is a clean energy financing program for residential properties of 4 units or less that enables residential homeowners to fund energy efficiency and renewable energy upgrades to their homes, all at no cost to the City of San Francisco through an add-on to their annual property tax bill. For the last year, everyone that has been involved has been working to make this program to what it is today, to include a number of important components, including workforce opportunities and training for our city's workers in the emerging clean energy economy. Really want to thank Pat Mulligan for all of his hard work on this issue, create good local jobs on local projects for our residents, and a program that provides competitive interest rates as well so that our residential homeowners have the best possible financing options moving forward. Obviously, we all believe in our green economy here in San Francisco, and I do believe we need all options on the table to try and catalyze this revolution that is happening. We've seen other parts of the state already adopt similar PACE financing programs, most notably Sonoma and Riverside counties that have seen very positive impacts and that have followed for the residents and the local economy. These upgrades can save money not only on repair costs and crucial home energy services, but also on monthly utility bills to the tune of thousands of dollars saved annually. This will continue to cement San Francisco's leadership on this topic. We have more work to do in rolling out the successful program, to be clear, and I hope you'll join me and many others citywide in supporting our efforts to restart Green Finance SF and have it up and running by the spring of next year, which is the goal. I do want to thank a number of people involved, certainly Mayor Lee for his co-sponsorship, in particular Roger Kim, the Mayor's Senior Environmental Advisor, the Department of the Environment, and Rich Chen in particular, our Department of Public Finance and Nadia Sase and her team, and the Commission on the Environment, particular Mr. Arce, as well as my staff, in particular Jeff Montejano from my office. And with that, colleagues, I hope to have your support.
Thank you. Colleagues, same house, same call on this item. Seeing no objection, these resolutions are adopted. Item 22.
Item 22 is a resolution to approve modification number 1 to a professional services agreement, the airport contract to design, develop, install, and maintain an integrated ground transportation and taxi management system between TransCore and the city for approximately $10.6 million pursuant to Charter Section 9.118 and extending the term for 1 year through June 30th, 2016.
Colleagues, any discussion on this item? Or do we need a roll call vote? Supervisor Campos.
Thank you. This is an item that came before the Budget and Finance Committee, and it's a contract at the airport. I raised concerns at the Budget Committee, and so we'll be voting against that today. Thank you.
All right. Any further comments? Seeing none. Same house, same. Oh, roll call vote, please, Madam Clerk.
On item 22, Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, no. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos. No. Campos, no. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. There are 8 ayes and 2 noes with the dissenting vote, Supervisor Avalos and Supervisor Campos.
Thank you. This resolution shall be adopted. Next item, please.
Item 23 is a resolution to approve the grant easement for installation of subsurface tiebacks and related surface access to TUP Folsom at 923 Folsom Street Development Project.
Colleagues, same house, same call. Without objection, this resolution is adopted. Supervisor Avalos.
Yes, thank you, Madam Clerk. I would like to rescind the vote on item number 7.
All right, colleagues, without objection? Or is there a second to that? Seconded by Supervisor Farrell, without objection.
And this item, we have an amendment of the whole, just some cleanup language. I had continued the item from the last meeting. It's about just making sure that we're aligned with our proper way we align our services for security for the MTA, and our Deputy City Attorney, John Givney, will explain the amendment.
Deputy City Attorney John Gibner. So the ordinance provides that the MTA in its RFP can require bidders to pay prevailing wages to security contractors. The ordinance before you currently doesn't have a definition of prevailing wage. So Supervisor Avalos, working with the MTA, has submitted a table to the clerk for inclusion in the clerk's file setting out what the prevailing wages will be for these contractors, and an accompanying amendment to the ordinance that basically says the prevailing wages shall be those that are set forth in the clerk's file.
Okay, so we could accept that amendment offered and support the underlying ordinance. So I'd like to make the amendment according to our Deputy City Attorney, clarifying the language around prevailing wage for our security contractors for the MTA.
Is there a second to that motion? Seconded by Supervisor Marr. Roll call vote, please, on item 7 as amended, or on the amendment, I'm sorry.
Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener?
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
They're calling.
Supervisor Avalos just made an amendment to item number 7. Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos?
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell?
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr? Marr, aye. There are 10 ayes.
The amendment passes. And now on the underlying item, can we take same house, same call on that, on the underlying item for item 7?
As amended.
As amended. Oh. We may need to do a roll call vote. No? No? All right, on the underlying item, item 7 as amended, now can we take the same house, same call? Without objection, this item is passed on first reading as amended. And now if we can go back to item 23 where we were, I think that we'll need to rescind that vote and then redo that. Yes, Supervisor Campos.
Motion to rescind.
Seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Thank you. The vote is rescinded. And now, Madam Clerk.
Roll call. On item 23, Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed. Aye. Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr. Aye. Marr, aye. There are 10 ayes.
That item is adopted. That resolution is adopted. Item 24, please.
Item 24 is a resolution to authorize the nullification of the current 4 priority conservation areas, the Sutro Tower, Aqua Vista Twin Peaks, Paloux Phelps Open Space, and the Bayview Radio property, to allow the Planning Department to further study the topic to recommend new designations that align more closely with the policies and goals adopted by the city.
Colleagues, can we take that same house, same call? Without objection, that resolution is adopted. Next item, please, Madam Clerk.
Item 25 is an ordinance to amend the Campaign and Governmental Conduct Code by adding, deleting, and changing titles of designated officials and employees, reflecting organizational and staffing changes.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I actually just have one typo change to make to item 25 as a sponsor on that item. Page 31, line 20, instead of saying steam filter, should read steam fitter. So if we can see if colleague can adopt that change without objection. Seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Without objection, that amendment is adopted. And on the underlying item 25, please. We may need a roll call vote since the House has changed.
Okay. On item 25, Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr. Marr, aye. There are 10 ayes.
That item is passed on first reading. Next item, please.
Item 26 is a motion to appoint Mark Schur and Richard Ivanhoe to the Park, Recreation, and Open Space Committee, terms ending February 1st, 2016.
Colleagues, same house, same call. Without objection, that motion is approved. Item 27.
Item 27 is a motion to appoint Irene Conway to the San Francisco Health Authority, term ending January 15th, 2018.
Same house, same call. Without objection, that motion is approved. Item 28.
Item 28 is a motion to appoint Bert Hill to the Bicycle Advisory Committee, term ending November 19th, 2016.
Same house, same call. Without objection, that motion is approved. Item 29.
Item 29, motion to appoint Delano Seymour, waiving the residency requirement, Kim Armbruster, and Eric Brown to the Local Homeless Coordinating Board, terms ending October 21st, 2018.
Same house, same call. Without objection, that motion is approved. Next item.
Item 30 is a motion to confirm the mayor's appointment of Marilee Mondahar to the Commission on the Community Investment and Infrastructure, term ending November 3rd, 2018.
Same house, same call. Without objection, that motion is approved. Next item.
Item 31 is a motion to confirm the mayor's appointment of Mara Rosales to the Commission on Community Investment and Infrastructure, term ending November 3rd, 2018.
Same house, same call. Without objection, that motion is approved.
Item 32 is an ordinance to amend the administrative code by establishing the duties of the Office of Early Care and Education and creating the Office of Early Care and Education Citizens Advisory Committee.
Supervisor Yee.
Thank you, President Tang. Our city established the Office of Early Care and Education to help us meet the growing needs in our city, especially with a rising infant and toddler population. This office will help us align and coordinate our city's efforts to provide early care and education for children ages 0 to 5. This includes meeting the goals of the citywide plan for early care and education and out of school time. The ordinance we are reviewing today serves to reinforce the duties of the Office of Early Care and Education and to establish a Citizens Advisory Committee to help with the development of a strategic plan to improve access for our young children to high-quality early care and education. With the passage of Prop C in November, the Office of Early Care and Education is tasked with developing a strategic plan by 2016. The Office of ECE Citizens Advisory Committee will be a 9-member body jointly appointed by the Mayor and the Board of Supervisors that will represent a cross-section of parents, early care and education providers, experts, and advocates to help advise the director and the office to help our city expand early education for all and to offer expertise in the areas of policy, planning, collaboration, and strategic partnerships. The development of this body was a collaborative effort with the staff at the Office of Early Care and Education, the Child Care Planning and Advisory Committee, and others such as the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, San Francisco First Five, and the San Francisco Unified School District. I really want to thank the following supervisors who agreed to co-author this. These are Supervisors Avalos, Kim, Bree, Mar, Tang, and Wiener. And I especially want to thank the staff of a few of the offices, Beth Rubenstein from Supervisor Avalos' office, and Sunny Aguilo from Supervisor Kim's office, and in particular my own staff, Jen Lowe, from my office. Quite a few individuals from the field provided important input into this piece of legislation. People like Barbara Carlson, Director of the Office of Early Care and Education, Erica Maybaum, Coordinator of the Child Care Planning and Advisory Council, Candace Wong, the Chair of the same body, and other members of that same body. We also have members from the Children's Funding Community Coalition. We have the Director of Laurel Klumak from San Francisco First Five, Carla Bryan, who's the Director of the San Francisco Unified School District's Early Education Division, and Jamila Brooks from SFUSD. So with all their input, we feel like we're heading down the right road here. And since the introduction of this ordinance, we have made minor amendments to help strengthen the language describing the duties of the Citizen Advisory Committee. We are thankful for all the input from stakeholders and city staff. So these again, these amendments were minor. It's clarifying the role of the CAC even further, changing some of the deadlines so that we could make sure that we can meet these deadlines, and eliminating the requirement for the mayor's appointments to go through the board confirmation process. With that, I hope I will have the support of my colleagues.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Seeing no further discussion, can we take this same House, same call? Oh, second on the motion to amend. Seconded by Supervisor Marr. Amendment has passed. And if we can take that same House, same call on the underlying. I apologize. I believe that from being in committee, the amendments were actually made in the committee level. Correct, Supervisor Yee? Okay,
correct.
Yes, correct. Thank you. So let's take 32, same House, same call. Without objection, that ordinance is passed on first reading. Item 33, please.
Item 33 is an ordinance to authorize settlement of the lawsuit filed by Paul Haynes in the amount of $110,000.
Colleagues, same House, same call. Without objection, that ordinance is passed on first reading. And now, colleagues, since we are here at 2:30, with your permission, unanimously, I'd like to take a special in memoriam today at 2:30, given that we have family members who are here. We're very honored by your presence, for taking the time during this difficult time to be here with us today. And so today, on behalf of our city family, I'd like to offer an in memoriam on behalf of Jennifer Entine Matz. I'd like to acknowledge that today we have in our presence her two children, Madeline and Tobias, her mother Jean, her father Alan, the father of Madeline and Tobias, the two most important people in Jennifer's life, Dan Matz, her sister-in-law Missy Matz, her niece Haley Matz Squires, and I'd also, of course, like to acknowledge her sister Sarah. Colleagues, as many of you know, Jennifer she passed away, I think, too early. She has been described as brilliant, talented, quick-witted, an honest broker in the world of politics. And Jennifer, she first started out as an attorney and then got involved in politics by working on Bevan Dufty's first campaign for supervisor. She started working for the city in 2004 as a legislative aide to then Supervisor Michaela Alioto-Pierre. In 2010, Jennifer took over as the director of our Office of Economic and Workforce Development, and it is there that she took, I think, our world by storm and did so many things and accomplished so many on behalf of San Franciscans. There, she oversaw the comprehensive reform of the city's workforce development system to ensure that the city's most economically disadvantaged residents have access to high-paying, high-quality jobs. Jennifer oversaw the development and implementation of the city's first ever economic development plan and the creation of the Office of Economic Analysis within the Comptroller's Office to ensure that all proposed legislation is evaluated with respect to its long-term economic impact on the city. Jennifer helped manage the comprehensive reform of the city's business tax to ensure that the tax did not serve as a disincentive to job creation. She helped pass the life sciences tax credit, paving the way to growing the city's life science sector from 2 companies in 2003 to over 250 companies today. She led efforts to revitalize mid-market by recruiting companies to mid-market with tax incentives, while at the same time ensuring that those companies give back with community incentives to serve mid-market's neediest populations. Jennifer was a champion for small businesses. She led the effort to create the Office of Small Business and the Small Business Assistance Center. She led the increase in the small business payroll tax exemption, and she oversaw the renewal of the State Enterprise Zone Tax Credit Program in San Francisco. Jennifer led China SF, the city's public-private international business development initiative connecting China and San Francisco. She led the creation of the Tourism Improvement District, which funds the tourism sector marketing and promotions programs led by San Francisco Travel Association, and funded the renovation of the Moscone Center. Jennifer helped to launch Invest in Neighborhoods, doubling the city's commercial corridor work to implement improvements in 25 corridors citywide. She directed the city's most important waterfront development efforts, most recently including America's Cup, Pier 27 Cruise Terminal Project, Pier 70, and the Warriors' planned move to Mission Bay. So it is with heavy heart that we are sad to hear that Jennifer has passed from us. She has done so much on behalf of our city, not just for our current generation, but for generations to come. And so on behalf of the board, I'd like to extend our deepest sympathies to Jennifer's children, family, friends, coworkers, everyone. We are all so grateful for her contributions to San Francisco. I wanted to also announce that beginning yesterday, Monday, Mayor Lee has opened a condolence book for friends, colleagues, and members of the public to sign in remembrance of Jennifer, which will be available from 8:30 a.m. until 5:30 p.m. in the mayor's office in room 200 at City Hall. I also wanted to announce that on December 16th, next Tuesday at 11 a.m., that Jennifer's memorial will take place at the James R. Herman Cruise Terminal at Pier 27, and all are welcome to attend and pay our respects to Jennifer and all the great work that she has done for our city. So with that, again, I'd like to make this, if without objection from the entire Board of Supervisors, I'd like to offer members of our board some remarks and also invite up Todd Rufo from our Office of Economic and Workforce Development to say a few words. And then further after that, if there's no objection from this board, then I'd like to yield the floor to Jennifer's family members, to her father Alan, to Dan, if they'd like to say a few words. So with that, Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you. This is really to Jennifer, to her family. My class of colleagues came into the Board of Supervisors about 4 years ago now, and she had worked for my predecessor, Michaela Elliott-Appier, for a while. And so I was introduced to her as someone I could really rely on, if you will, and then started working through some of the Warriors issues and all the other projects on the pier that she'd be involved in. And she was one of the most, I just want to let you know, she was as someone in our position, one of the most amazing people to work with, so hardworking, obviously accomplished so much, but really a great person and a great colleague inside of City Hall. And, I remember not only working with her, but after being diagnosed, seeing her last year during a holiday party, just about this time, and her amazing strength and heart and kind of dedication and commitment to fight what she was fighting, and then really hit home this year at the race with Jennifer that our clerk was so instrumental in putting together. Your mother, your sister, your daughter was so inspiring to all of us. We love her, and we still do and always will, and just want to let you know how amazing she was to all of us inside of City Hall. And we thank you and her family for the gift of all of her time here in City Hall, and just please know how much she'll be missed by every one of us. So, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I actually had the opportunity to work with Jen. She was actually probably one of the first members of the city family that I got to work with. She didn't come into my office the first day that we were sworn in, but she probably came into my office the third day, and she soon became a very large presence in our office, and many of the projects that President Tang had mentioned took place in our district, whether it was many of our waterfront projects to the Warriors Arena. And, Jen and I did not always agree, but the one thing I can say about Jen is that she was incredibly smart. We all respected and admired her, and we knew that she cared deeply about the city. And I got the opportunity to spend some time with her in Shanghai, I think a couple of weeks before her diagnosis came out. And a couple of weeks later, when our office heard, it brought so much humanity, I think, to the work that we do. And I think that we debate and we discuss a lot about what is the best moving forward for San Francisco, whether it's our economy and our community. But that diagnosis that day really honed in what was most important to us, and that is the people that we work with, the people that care about the city. We're all in this together, and there is so much humanity. I think that Jen's story had brought in terms of what mattered, and I just want to really thank her family because I know how hard she worked. So many hours that she spent with us at City Hall and instead of with the folks that were closest to her. But she gave so much to everything. And even when she called our office in June to start talking about the Warriors Arena in Mission Bay, I remember thinking, why are you calling me? But it just showcased her commitment and her dedication. She loved this job. She loved this work. And I'm so glad to have been able to work with someone that loves what she does, as so many of us do here, to her very last day. But also the significant sadness that all of us feel here in the family to have lost a member of our family, but also just our gratitude to the community and family that supported her, I think, through one of the most challenging times that anyone can go through, to thank you and to acknowledge the incredible work that she has done for all of us.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Weiner.
Thank you, Madam President. It's hard to believe that Jen isn't here anymore. She was a really amazing person, and I got to work with her in her capacity at OEWD, but also on campaigns, and also as a constituent, and getting to know her in that respect as well. When she lived on Buena Vista, she would sometimes help me navigate the shoals of the politics in that neighborhood, and it's important to always have those very, very level-headed people on a neighborhood level who can help you through some very difficult situations, and Jen was always there, so it was always great to be able to work with her in all of those different capacities. And the one consistent aspect of Jen, whether it was on a personal level or campaign or in City Hall or in the neighborhood, was absolute and total integrity. And we know, in this building and in this line of work, there are a lot of different types of people that you deal with, and some can be more pleasant than others, or you can have people who are more straightforward than others. And when you have people that, whether you agree or disagree on particular issues, that are, and I know the phrase honest broker has been used, but are just being completely candid with you and are just totally and utterly honest and straightforward, that makes all the difference in the world. And her level of professionalism and just commitment to the city was extraordinary. Jen, I think, and I know with a lot of different kinds of illnesses, there are the ups and the downs, and it's a roller coaster when you think, are you going to be able to beat it, or you're not going to be able to beat it. And she called me one day saying that she was going through her bucket list and wanted to go to the top of the Golden Gate Bridge. And I think, even though we were happy to make that happen for her, I think that's when it first really hit me, the fact that she called and said, this is my bucket list. And I know that she fought until the end because she was a fighter, and we're all going to miss her a lot.
Thank you, Supervisor Weiner. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, Madam President. I got to work with Jennifer Matz as a legislative aide. I was a legislative aide at the same time that Jennifer Matz was, and it was really great to work with her, and she brought so much enthusiasm to her work. And I got to know her pretty well, and I played softball with her. There were a lot of, we had a team, a Board of Supervisors team that played softball together. We played in the middle of the winter in some poorly lit field out in the Presidio. And I think Jennifer played second base, and I know baseball was really important for her. And she told me about how she really cared about the history of baseball, and I got to know that she was really committed to racial justice. She looked at the African American leagues, and that was really important to her when she was in school. And that carried out for her moving forward. I saw her as someone who was really compassionate in San Francisco, was very conscientious of her work and her place in this city. She brought me out to the Friends School when they were raising money for the Friends School, and I got to get a tour of the old Levi factory, which is now the Friends School on Valencia Street. And I knew that she was really committed to making sure that that school could be accessible to many people who wouldn't necessarily have access to it. And I saw her as really opening doors for a lot of people in San Francisco, and I think that's what really drove her, like those values of justice that made her work meaningful to her. I didn't also always agree with Jennifer on the approaches that she gave us, coming from tax breaks or supporting America's Cup, but I always knew that she was really a straight shooter and someone that I could have a really great conversation with offline about what's behind the background behind policy that we disagreed on, and I really valued that relationship, and I valued her friendship. And she's been through some hard times even before her fight with cancer, and we had a lot of talks about that as well, about difficulties with relationships, and the memory of her is really, really strong with me as someone who has a great deal of integrity and has made this city a better place, and my condolences to the family.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. I'll be very brief. I speak as someone who at times disagreed with Jennifer, and I think it's a testament to her and her legacy that so many individuals, whether they agree with her or not, respected her and admired her. Life is very fragile, and I am especially grateful to her children and her family for the fact that they allowed her to be a part of this family. And the thing about this work is that it can be very tough, and sometimes the sense of humanity gets lost. But with Jennifer, I always knew that she was someone who, besides being a straight shooter, someone who really cared about the city and wanted to get to the right result. And it's only fitting, given the legacy that she has left for this city, that her greatest legacy is present today, which is her children. And to her children, I want to say that your mom was a pretty amazing person. And, it's easy to be brave in good times. It's the true test of character happens when there are challenging times. And I think that by that measure, she was an incredible human being, and you have a lot to be proud of. And know that she will always be remembered for her contributions, her heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. Just want to acknowledge the family and let you know that we as a city family grieve with you. I've had the opportunity to watch Jen Metz, her career mature when she was a legislative aide. I was a staffer. And I always actually use her as an example when I talk to my staff of, you see what a hardworking person can do and what they can acquire in a short period of time. And we're left here to grieve, but it's important to remember that her body was sick and she's left this earth. But what remains true is that her spirit is still with us. And it's a spirit that lives on in my work as a member of the Board of Supervisors. But also, she lives in the hearts and minds of the people that worked with her. They're her family, and they're also in her children. That is her greatest legacy and her gift that she's given to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. And before we proceed to Todd Rufer from OEWD, I'd like to offer Madam Clerk an opportunity for some words.
Thank you, Madam President. What is most striking to me about Jennifer is that in the midst of a significant medical crisis, she embraced the Race with Jennifer and assumed the main role to raise funds for the UCSF Pancreatic Cancer Center to help move the science forward to find a cure for others someday. It was a critical time for Jennifer, when one's natural instinct would have been to turn inward and focus on the self, and at great cost to Jennifer. She gave up her privacy and became the public face of a worthy cause that she knew would most likely impact others. And to me, this is the mark of a true and brave and compassionate person, to give to others in a time of personal crisis. And few would have the courage to do something like that. I'm in awe to have known such bravery and not forgetting her sacrifice. We'll strive to live in that way in her honor. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And now I'd like to turn the floor over to Todd Rufo from OAWD, and I know that many of her colleagues are here as well today. Mr. Rufo.
Madam President, thank you so much. Supervisors, there's many people who are with us in the chamber today, from family to OAWD staff members, former OAWD staff members, staff from the port, planning, and so many other departments that are here. I think they're here because Jennifer touched all of our lives and meant so much to us all. Of course, Jennifer was brilliant and courageous and funny and inspiring, but she had that rare ability to help all of us be our best, to take ideas that we have and make them better, to help us get to the opportunities, to find the way forward when we may not know. She helped us all be better people. But I also think about the people who aren't in the chambers today, the residents, the visitors, the small businesses, the kids who will know Jennifer, even if they've never met her. These are people who may have breakfast on San Bruno or go to a Warriors game or start a business on Central Market or start a new company in Mission Bay, a visitor to Moscone Center, or someone taking a stroll on the waterfront. Jennifer gave 10 years to this city. She loved the city. She loved the work. And she gave so much to all of us. I think in these moments, as I've shared with OAWD and others, that I've asked all of us to be there for each other in these challenging and difficult days ahead, and to continue to send that positive energy to her friends and family in these difficult days. I think just one thought from me to the family and Madeline and Tobias. You know, your mom was the most courageous and inspirational, selfless people I've ever known. And I appreciate the opportunity. I'm so grateful for having known her. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rufo. And without objection, if any of the family members would like to give any remarks, I'd like to offer them this opportunity. Thank you for being here with us, Mr. Entine.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President. I'm Alan Entine. I am Jennifer's dad. And I want to initially make one correction. The newspaper reports about when they first came out about Jennifer's passing said that I was of New York. Well, that's a long time ago. I've lived in San Francisco for the past 6 years and am just so very happy I'm out here and look forward to spending the rest of my life here. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has been so supportive and just so with friendship and with attitude and with every fiber of their being from so many different sources and so many different areas that have helped Jennifer and helped our family during this very difficult period. The people here in city government, the folks at the Port Authority, the people at the San Francisco Giants who cooperated with that race that raised over $340,000 for the Pancreas Center at UCSF, and the folks at the Golden State Warriors who have been close friends of Jennifer during this process. And I really think that Jennifer's spirit now is with the Giants and the Warriors and will continue to be so. The parents and staff at both Madeline and Tobias's schools, who for one full year provided hot evening meals for the family every night while Jennifer was in this illness. The folks at the outstanding UCSF Medical Center and the Pancreas Center, and especially her doctor, Dr. Margaret Tempero. These are extraordinary individuals who face this difficult disease all the time. And we want to, just hopefully. Well, this is San Francisco, right? I've been to a lot of supervisors meetings, so I know, and that's what I love about this. The creative spirit in San Francisco cannot be beaten, I'm telling you. And finally, the folks at Hospice by the Bay, who carry out a very difficult task every day. I don't know how they do it, but they were just wonderful. So on behalf of our entire family, we want to thank you all for what you have done, and know that Jennifer's spirit is going to continue within all of us and all of you, and that someday, soon, we'll find a cure for this terrible disease. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Entine. And at this time, I'd like to offer any other family members the opportunity to speak. Okay. Well, seeing none, is there someone coming up? No. Okay. All right. Then at this time, then I want to again send our best, our deepest condolences to the family. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule to be here today. And with that, I'd like to move on to our next 2:30 special order. Supervisor Wiener has a special commendation today.
Thank you, Madam President. Maybe I'll wait for them to. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, today I'd like to present a special commendation and honor a longtime and departing employee of the Department of Public Health, Michael Baxter, who is leaving the department due to illness. Michael has dedicated his life to helping the youth of San Francisco through innovative public health approaches. He's particularly been an incredible champion of LGBT issues in public health. We have many challenges around youth, and particularly transition-age youth in San Francisco, and Michael, for decades, has been a real leader in helping the city to address these very real needs. Michael started his work at DPH in 1984. Through tireless work and intense commitment, he rose to the role of Director of Community Health Programs for Youth. His work really ran the gamut. For example, development of health education programs for incarcerated youth, to being a founding member of the advisory board for the 3rd Street Youth Center and Clinic. In addition, he served as chair of the Adolescent Health Working Group Steering Committee for 6 years. Throughout his career, and despite his many commitments, Michael has always made time to mentor upcoming young leaders. It is through his passion and intense dedication that his work will continue to positively impact public health in San Francisco for generations. The people of San Francisco are fortunate to have had Michael as their advocate and their friend in the field of public health, and so I'm honored to offer this commendation today and to thank Michael for his many years of service to the people of San Francisco. Before I ask Sherilyn Adams of Larkin Street Youth Services to come up and to accept this commendation on Michael's behalf, I know that Supervisor Campos would like to make some remarks as well.
Thank you.
Supervisor Campos.
Thank you. Thank you, Supervisor Wiener. I've had the opportunity and the honor to work with Michael in his role as the co-founder and the current chair of the Dimensions Collaborative Board for the Dimensions Clinic. It's a public-private collaboration that offers comprehensive health services for LGBTQ youth here in San Francisco. Michael has played an instrumental role in building a continuum of care for HIV-positive youth. He has always had so many commitments, but has gone out of his way above beyond what is expected of anyone, and has truly worked to establish protocols for improving the service delivery to so many queer and transgender youth in San Francisco. I am very honored to be able to say that I've worked with him, and I'm grateful to him and his family for the sacrifices they have made to help our community. What I have always appreciated about Michael is that he has also taken the time to mentor young people, and I think that he has always understood the importance of nurturing the next generation, and for that I am very grateful. So it is my honor to join Supervisor Wiener today in presenting this commendation, and I especially want to thank his family, because when someone makes the kind of commitment and provides the kind of service that Michael has provided and has made, it's not just they who are making a sacrifice, it's the family members as well. Thank you.
Supervisor Avalos. Oh.
Thank you. I just also wanted to put in a word for Michael Baxter. I've known him for a number of years. He's run the health clinic, or used to run the health clinic at the Balboa High School, and there are a few individuals I've seen in my work over the years who have been so dedicated to their work. I know that he worked many long hours, and on top of his work at the clinic, he was coordinating other health services at other schools and other places in the department, and he really made a huge difference in many young people's lives, and brought them to another level of awareness about their health in San Francisco. And it was remarkable as well because he was able to keep alive the Balboa High School Health Clinic when other clinics were falling by the wayside about 10 years ago. So he's done remarkable work in the city, and I hope we get to see him again soon. But I just want to say thank you so much for all you've done in the city for public health for young people.
So, Madam President, if I could ask Sherilyn Adams to come up and accept the commendation.
Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody. I'm here to speak on behalf of Michael, who could not be here to accept this accommodation, and his partner and his son are with him today. I think for all of us that are here to really celebrate Michael's work, he is an amazing man who has mentored not only so many young people, but also many of us in this work to be tireless advocates for young adults in the city. And he really, he was all about Tay before Tay was cool. He really was created opportunities for young people to have health care and mental health and substance abuse services. He was involved for homeless youth, for LGBT youth, for so many. Such a powerful voice that they should have access to the very services that they need. And in his leaving the department, his glue, this web that he has weaved of services, I think all of us will join in maintaining and keeping on behalf of young people in San Francisco. So I really thank you for taking the time to honor Michael and his work for the city. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Wiener. Our next special commendation will be presented by District 6 Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. We are actually commemorating and honoring a lot of upstanding individuals today. While this individual is not an official member of the city family, he is certainly a member of our city and a District 6 resident. I'm honoring an individual today that many of you have probably read about in the press recently. His name is Ben Schwartz. Ben is a Tenderloin resident, and on November 25th, he was attacked in our neighborhood after taking a stand against the verbal harassment and abuse directed at his girlfriend. He was returning from a party early that Saturday morning with his girlfriend and passed a man who continued to make sexually explicit threats at her. After crossing to the other side of the street and being followed, Ben asked the perpetrator to please stop harassing his girlfriend and was subsequently attacked. Punches were thrown, and then Ben ended up being stabbed 9 times in the back, in his face, neck, and arms, with the knife narrowly missing his spinal cord but puncturing his lung. While there are many women and men that stand up to this type of sexist and frankly violent behavior every day, Ben utilized this personal tragedy to make a public statement and elevate an issue that many of us, many women, take for granted in our daily lives, a pervasive problem in our culture and society. In fact, one that is so pervasive that there is a subconscious consensus, in fact, not even subconscious, often talked about on daily talk shows, that harassment is not a big deal. That in fact, that women who raise their voice and protest and speak out against street harassment and sexual discrimination are overreacting and perhaps even making the situation worse. Women are told that catcalls should be seen as compliments and that we should be flattered to be in the center of attention and objectification, even when this flattery is degrading and relentless. I still remember the first time I was sexually harassed on the street. I was no more than 11 years old, and it continued relentlessly throughout middle school and high school. And I remember not being able to understand why men spoke to me when I clearly, and I looked even younger then, when I clearly was not of age to be listening to those types of comments. And it impacted every single female friend that I had. Ben spoke out publicly and called this kind of reaction what it was, sexist. Critics then wondered why he was walking the Tenderloin so late at night, why he chose to go back to retrieve his wallet from a party instead of waiting till it was day. They claimed that this wouldn't have happened if he had just gotten a cab. But Ben made it clear people are missing the point. Every human being, regardless if they are a man or a woman, should be able to walk on our city streets free from harassment and violence. Geography, time of day, dress are not open invitations to attack others, and victims do not invite harm upon themselves, and they should not have further abuse heaped on them by the public for being responsible for another person's crime or abuse. In a recent post that I'll share, Ben and his girlfriend Miyoko wrote from the hospital. They said, "Now, for the folks that have never met us, not once, have only heard our story via internet outlets and media stations, the folks who didn't get wrapped up in any negativity and who truly thought that this was something that should have been addressed a long time ago. To those who feel passionate about stopping harassment and feel like women need to be done with this crap, or just feel like the right thing was done, we feel you. And trust me, we are on your side. We think if enough people started barking about this, more folks will get involved, and maybe if enough people start to take notice, some permanent changes could be set in place in the future real soon. We really hoped we helped in some small way of achieving positive change, and it's really hard to believe that guys can say vulgar and dirty crap to women and just get away with being creeps all day. It's just unacceptable behavior." Ben, by the way of some character background, has also had a history of erring on the side of righteousness and seeking to help his community. He once saw a bike online and suspected that he was stolen, so he purchased the bicycle from the theft and tracked down the owner, who he didn't even know, to return the bike to them. His friend Daniela recently said, "He definitely sticks up for women, for anyone really. If you're his friend for life, and I've watched him support many friends through many hard times. He's just so kind-hearted, and you can see that in everything that he does." We get to recognize a lot of people here at this board, people that have done really great things on behalf of our city, and folks that have done so much. But I think it's also important to remember the everyday heroes who, through their small acts, are standing up against some really systematic issues and problems that we have here in our society. SFPD is still looking for the man who stabbed Ben and who escaped in a silver sedan. They have an anonymous tip line at 575-4444 for those who may have information. But most importantly, I just want to recognize Ben, who is a resident of our district and our city, for his bravery and also his simple act of humanity. So thank you so much for being here today, and I want to invite you up to say a few words.
Wow. Madam President, thank you for having me. Thank you for those kind words, Jane. That was very sweet. I guess you said quite a lot about the story and a few things. I just wanted to thank, first and foremost, the two men who came to my aid that night and so helplessly stopped and found towels from the backs of their cars and put them on my neck and on my back and quite possibly saved my life. So I want to thank them, two men who I've never met, who hopefully in the future I have the pleasure of meeting. To my friends that are here today who supported me through all of this, my family who have been so great through all of this as well, to everybody actually at SF General Hospital who saved my life and who I feel are totally unappreciated and just fantastic staff over there, especially in the trauma department. As you can see, I was stabbed 9 times, and here I stand before you today. And to everyone who came out to our donation page, who my friend Daniela, who's here today, she put that together, and I would have never hoped that we would have raised enough money to even pay for my ambulance, but 994 people, many of whom I don't know, donated to help out with this cause and felt some sort of resonance with what this meant. And a lot of people have gone through this, especially women in the community, the downtown area, and all over San Francisco and in every large city, have felt some sort of connection with this problem that's kind of been growing and growing and growing. And like I said in my note there, if there was just a small piece of positive change that can come from this, or some sort of awareness that can be raised from this, then I'm happy to be an advocate for that. And thank you all very much for letting me speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. And our last special commendation will be presented by Supervisor Marr.
Thank you, President Tang. I'd like to ask if Terry Goodwin could come forward. And I believe Terry is here with a number of friends as well. Colleagues, please join me in recognizing an amazing activist for civil rights, for people with disabilities, building of strong partnerships with business and community-based organizations to really address key opportunity needs for people with disabilities. Terry Goodwin has spent 35 years building the ARC of San Francisco. She's the former Director of Partnerships and Business Development and the Director of Employment Services at the ARC. And I'm going to read through a number of key points about why she's so significant for San Francisco, but especially for people with disabilities in our city. For 35 years, she's helped to build strong community-based organizations and partnerships, especially with model businesses and employers in our city, to help support dignity and employment opportunities for people with disabilities. In the past several months, working with my office, she's been instrumental as a strong community partner with our office, giving us guidance and insights in our hearings and meetings and conversations to fight for full employment rights for people with disabilities, and to implement as fully as possible Civil Service Rule 115, which is one tool in ensuring that people with severe disabilities have opportunities for city employment. City employment for people with disabilities is a critical issue for my office, along with many in the community. Terry was a key member of the former advisory panel on city employment for persons with disabilities. It was a task force set up by our Department of Human Resources. This is about 6 to 7 years ago. And because of Terry's advocacy and many others in the community, we've reestablished this panel, and her insights will help us advance a lot of the work that began many, many years ago. Our Civil Service Rule 115 provides alternative processes for individuals with disabilities to join the city's workforce without having to go through the civil service examination, and it allows them to be subject to a 1-year evaluation period. And if the worker performs well during that period, the worker can advance to a regular permanent civil service status position. Terry joined the ARC in San Francisco 35 years ago. That's 1980, around that time. And her leadership in building employment services over the years has really brought the ARC to be a critical component of our city's safety net programs. So she's built the ARC, which now has 250 clients with developmental disabilities that are employed in San Francisco and San Mateo counties. So it's expanded regionally. In October, during Disability Awareness Month, she's been instrumental in bringing together annual events that acknowledge key model employers. The 10th anniversary award ceremony for employers and businesses that employ people with disabilities. She's a tremendous leader in building institutions like that create partnerships with businesses and community-based groups and city government. The Academy of Sciences hosted the last award ceremony, and I just wanted to thank her for that tremendous event that really emphasizes businesses stepping up, dignity for people with disabilities, that it's not out of charity, it's out of employment rights and dignity for people like many from the ARC and other groups that access jobs in many of the businesses and city government as well. Terry's going to be taking on a new position after 35 years at the ARC as the Deputy Director of Jobs for California's Best Buddies California, which is another great organization, a nonprofit similar to the ARC that's dedicated to serving, supporting, and advocating for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. I know Best Buddies is really helpful with USF, which is in my district, in supporting young people like John Hammond to get jobs at the Academy of Sciences, which is one of the model employers in the Richmond district. But I know at many high schools and colleges, Best Buddies really helps to link up really talented and really great advocates like John Hammond from our district. In Terry's years of dedicated service, she formed and maintained this, what's called the BAC, or the Business-Based Advisory Council, which produced 10 years of corporate support and recognition events called the Work-Life Awards. Their signature event recognizes the achievement of workers with disabilities while also celebrating model businesses that champion their success. It's a unique partnership that we've never seen before in the city, but congratulations on 10 years of that work here, and hopefully it spreads throughout the state with your work with Best Buddies. I wanted to just cut to the chase and just say one of Terry's most important accomplishments has been the development of Project Search, which is a new internship program, or an internship program at PG&E, which is 4 years old. Now it has a 95% job placement rate, and since PG&E, she's worked hard to develop more internships with new programs that are starting, like at the Academy of Sciences in my district, and Bright Horizons Child Care Center and the SPCA as well. Terry's refocused the BAC into more effective corporate cultivation, especially within the tech sector. I know really effective work, establishing the agency's presence also in the mid-market coalition with strong relationships with utilizing new tools like Rule 115 for city employment of ARC folks. I think Terry's values are what I want to emphasize: belief in people's of everybody's abilities, of all San Franciscans, values of the need for government and the private sector to provide meaningful opportunities for people with disabilities, and especially in bringing partnerships, corporate, business, and communities together. She's an amazing individual. In conclusion, I know she's going to continue her amazing service to San Francisco, but now the region and the state as well. So colleagues, please give a warm Board of Supervisors welcome to Terry Goodwin from the ARC and now with Best Buddies. Thank you.
Thank you Thank you so much, Supervisor Marr. I appreciate it so much, and I am so honored to have this acknowledgement. I have loved my life at the ARC San Francisco. They've been wonderful. We've been able to place, like you said, over 250 people in jobs at places like Salesforce and Twitter and Morrison Forcer, about 150 different corporations. And I'm excited to move forward with Best Buddies, and I'm hoping that with Best Buddies I'll be able to expand my reach. We have come a long way for people with disabilities, developmental disabilities, but we have a lot longer way to go. Basically, the people with developmental disabilities have 80% unemployment rate. And so with your help and with the Board of Supervisors here, I hope we can take some action to change that. The good news is that we've done fairly well with the private sector, but we have not done well with the public sector, like Supervisor Marr has helped to highlight with the fact that the Rule 115 has not produced hires in the last decade of people with disabilities. So we really need to change that. And I want to urge Mayor Lee and all of you to champion this leadership effort to make 2015 the year of City of San Francisco to increase the hiring of people with developmental disabilities and all disabilities, and make it a model program for which other cities can follow. So thank you so much. I am so honored, and I look forward to working with all of you on this new call, an important call to action. It is really critical. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and that concludes our 2:30 special commendations. So, colleagues, I'd like to ask that we just finish our 3 remaining new business items and then proceed to our 3 p.m. special orders. So with that, Madam Clerk, item 34.
Item 34 is a resolution to support the creation of open source voting systems and to study new models of voting system development.
Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, our election system, of course, is the backbone of our democracy. Free and fair elections ensure that we as elected officials have earned the trust instilled in us by the public, and that those elections are conducted in a free, transparent, and fair way. Today before us is a resolution in support of San Francisco working, along with communities and organizations across the state, to make our elections more transparent, more secure, and more publicly accountable by moving towards open source voting. Currently, our voting technology consists of a black box system created by private vendors holding proprietary software that is unavailable for public review. Last year, Senator Alex Padilla, now our Secretary, or about to be our Secretary of State, passed Senate Bill 360, which provided regulatory relief by allowing for counties to develop, own, and operate public voting systems. This important step opens the door for counties to develop open source voting technology, which means that technology used to administer elections is publicly available and viewable, allowing for greater accountability and transparency. By following the open source path, we can ensure elections with even more integrity than they already have, with less opportunity for fraud and more accurate results. And so this resolution will move us in that direction by requesting that LAFCO study how San Francisco could implement its own voting system and move towards open source, and reaffirming San Francisco's commitment to open source voting. So this is an important step forward, colleagues. I want to acknowledge that we've all received some emails in the last few days from some advocates expressing concern, not with the substance of the resolution. I think that there is pretty universal support for the substance of the resolution, but expressing concern that one organization is named in the resolution. And in the spirit of moving forward in as united a way as possible, because I think all of the advocates have, I believe, the same ultimate goal of open source voting and greater transparency in our voting system. I'm going to suggest or make a motion to amend so that we are keeping this general in nature and not naming any particular organization. I do want to say that the organization at issue, the California Association of Voting Officials, is an organization that I believe 20 California counties have joined. But with that said, I think it would make sense not to name any particular organization, because there are various groups working on this issue. So the motion to amend would do a few things. I'll make it as an oral motion. The first is in the title to strike the words the California Association of Voting Officials and to strike that from the title, and then to strike several whereas clauses. The two whereas clauses on page 4, lines 11 to 21, and then the whereas clause on page 5, lines 1 to 3. Again, colleagues, this is not in any way out of negativity towards this particular organization, but given that there are different advocates who work with various organizations, we thought it would be best just to be general in nature. So that is my amendment.
Thank you. So Supervisor Wiener has made a motion to amend. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Marr. And colleagues, without objection, the amendment is adopted. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you so much to Supervisor Wiener for bringing this forward, and advocates like Brent Turner as well. And I'm really supportive of a more inclusive approach, as Supervisor Wiener has amended. I wanted to thank Lowell Finley for his thoughtful letter, and many others, Stephen Hill from the Center for Voting and Democracy, Gail Work, and others for giving insights and making this a better resolution as well, and Mimi Kennedy as well. But I think this is a really well-worded resolution that helps move us forward in the most inclusive way to advance a lot of the values that Supervisor Wiener has brought up. So thank you for making those amendments.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I'd like to add my name as a sponsor to this item, and want to thank Supervisor Wiener for bringing this before us. I think it's certainly an important issue at the Department of Elections, but also overall, I think, for the city and county of San Francisco. And I know a couple of months ago, I did make a request to the budget and legislative analysts regarding how we can move our reliance from licensed software to open source. I think there are a number of different issues that make this an important one, the budget being one, but also just being able to create transparent software that is free and accessible, and actually often better maintained because they are open source. I know this continues to be a big dialogue in Europe and in DC, and I hope that we can continue this dialogue beyond the Department of Elections to the rest of our departments here in the city.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Seeing no further discussion on this item, can we take this item as amended, same house, same call? Without objection, this resolution is adopted as amended. Item 35.
Item 35 is a resolution to extend the term for the Balboa Park Station Community Advisory Committee.
Colleagues, same house, same call? Without objection, this resolution is adopted. Next item.
Item 36, motion to appoint Krut Singha, Joshua Marker, Raymond Gary McCoy, Kenneth Wingard, Paul Olson, Jason Henderson to the Market and Octavia Community Advisory Committee, terms ending December 16th, 2016.
Same house, same call. Without objection, this motion is approved. And now, Madam Clerk, if you could read our first special 3 p.m. order.
Items 37 through 40 comprise the special order at 3 p.m. for a public hearing of persons interested in the July 3, 2014 Planning Department's determination that the proposed project located at 2853 through 2857 Broderick Street is categorically exempt from environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act. Items 38 through 40 are the motions affirming or reversing the department's exemption, determination, and the preparation of findings.
So, colleagues, we have the appeal, as was stated, for the categorical exemption from environmental review for 2853 through 2857 Broderick Street. For this hearing, we will consider the adequacy, accuracy, sufficiency, and completeness of the Planning Department's environmental review. So, colleagues, unless there is an objection, this is how I propose we proceed with the hearing. Given that we do have multiple appellants in this case, the appellants will have up to 15 minutes total for an opening presentation. That is 15 minutes to be divided however the appellants see fit. Next, the members of the public supporting the appeal shall have up to 2 minutes each. Followed by that, the planning department shall have up to 10 minutes to describe the grounds for their exemption. Followed by that, the project sponsor or respondent shall have up to 15 minutes total for presentation. Then the members of the public supporting the project sponsor shall have up to 2 minutes each, and then the appellant shall have up to 5 minutes total for rebuttal. So with that, I'd like to offer the district supervisor, Supervisor Farrell, an opportunity for opening remarks.
Thanks. I'll withhold comments till afterwards.
All right, with that then, if we can have the appellants. Are the appellants here in the chamber?
Let's see, which microphone should I use? This one?
You can use the one at the podium to your right.
Okay. Well, there are two of us who are appellants. Therefore, if you could tell us when about 7.5 minutes are over, and we can share it between us. Good afternoon, supervisors. We are here once again, members of the Cow Hollow community, to redress our grievances with our government and our elected representatives. We were here on appeal about 2 years ago, exactly 27 months ago, on the same project with part of the same CEQA issues that we face today, in a manner that we call deja vu all over again, or a variant on the play same time next year. Last time we came, we were here to withdraw our CEQA appeal because we had reached an agreement with the same project sponsor mediated by the good offices of Supervisor Farrell. We reached an agreement after CEQA issues were solved by the work of city planning, historical preservation, and DBI, and the work of Ron Tom. We resolved all our issues, and the project sponsor was able to proceed to construction immediately, should she choose to. The agreement, while between all the surrounding neighbors and project sponsor, was only signed after city planning and DBI approved the plans and assured us that they were enforceable and acceptable as is. Board of Permit Appeals approved the permit within a couple of weeks, and we withdrew our appeals. We signed the agreement only after DBI and city planning and preservation passed on the plan, and therefore, in reliance of their assurances, we signed the agreement. The project sponsor purchased the property in a private sale in May of 2012, and we were able to sign our agreement by September 4th, 2012. In a matter of 4 months, the issues were resolved and the project was ready for construction. We have now been at this since September 4th, 2012, 27 months, and there's no end in sight. Why are we here today? We are here today because the project sponsor unilaterally abandoned the agreement that she signed and created a new plan which has been revealed to us by only fits and starts through piecemeal and serial permit process, and continues to produce progeny to the present. My focus is first to address the fundamental issue that the state California Supreme Court addressed in the Laurel Heights Improvement Association versus UCSF, when it argued that in CEQA matters, the community should be informed in totality of what is the project. And prior to any hearings, they are allowed to see with finality what it is to be built, and they can look at it in that comprehensiveness, holistic, final way, what the project is. For the last 2 years, we have not been able to do that. Once the project sponsor abandoned the plans immediately after our signing the agreement, she took 6 months to come up with a new set of plans, which we found out in about April, and thereafter, 7 permits have been issued on this job. The net effect for us has been that basically the fundamentals of the agreement, since this is the oldest building in Cow Hollow's neighborhood, our neighborhood, it's 125 years old. It is part of a very historic district of similar historical resource buildings, our family home being next door on the south side, 2845 Broderick. And it has both a social history and architectural history, and as well as a city planning history of how diverse a neighborhood should be in terms of building homes, flats, ownership, and rental units all together. What happened then in April was that a set of permits were beginning to be issued, and we discovered that the original plans for the building were defective as far as the declaration of height measurements, and that the building was lifted, the height of the building after the lift varied, and it was over 40 feet on the northern elevation. We immediately contacted the city, and she was given a notice of correction. She gave it in for July 1st, 2013 rather, and in fact, she was supposed to have a 311 notification to the neighbors in light of their requirement originally with a permit. Therefore, where we are today is simply to challenge the issue of the CEQA negative determination and to address the issue of the building height, the encroachment into the south yard setback with the new bays for a fireplace, encroachment into the backyard, building on the entire lot, roof development and the creations of new dormers, changes to the facade of the building, and environmental and historical preservation issues due to her dwelling unit merger. As we have mentioned to you, since this is a historic resource building and one of the most important ones in our area, and it is adjoined by other historic resource buildings, the height of the building has tremendous effect on the light, air of all the adjoining neighbors. The folks on Filbert Street, perpendicular to us and adjoining her on the west side, in fact, have had most of their kitchen light totally destroyed by the lift of the building and the intention of squaring off the roof for further development on the roof. The encroachment into the south yard setback, which is adjoining our family building, has been addressed in the original agreement. She initially wanted to have a second means of egress for a new unit that was being created, and through the hard work of city planning, DBI, and historical preservation, she was given such an egress through the garage. She then abandoned it. Now she has come in again with a new encroachment into the side yard. This prevents us again from light, air, repair of our buildings, and goes against the very issue that is characteristic of the 5 houses on Broderick Street, all the historic resources with very wide alleyways between the buildings, and that was a characteristic of the Bay Tradition building between 1890 and 1915. The roof development is still unclear to us. While she has claimed that she wants to create new dormers, square the roof, and create other aspects of development on the roof, we have never actually seen what the complete plans are. The facade of the building is still planned to be changed, and there was a permit that she had withdrawn, but seems to be coming back, changing the entry system of the building to suit her new development. And the environmental and historical preservation issues with regard to the dwelling unit merger has a lot to do with the architecture of the entryways, and in fact whether those entryways are going to be used now for an internal staircase or still for the ebb and flow of traffic from 2 separate units.
Through the President to Mr. Zareski, you have 7 minutes and 30 seconds left.
Okay, I will close and give a chance for my colleague to. We are asking you to do the following things as a consensus of all the neighbors that we presented to Supervisor Farrell, and I will let him give you his interpretation of his issues, and I will come back and I'll finish with what we're requesting.
Thank you. Next appellant, please.
Is it possible to plug this in or no? No? Okay, don't worry. That's okay. Well, I'll just put this down. Okay, my name is Paul Wise, and I live at 2844 Broderick Street, which is directly across the street from 2853 Broderick Street. I've been asked by Tim McCurry to speak on his behalf tonight. The McCurrys are our next-door neighbors. They also live on the east side of Broderick Street, which is also directly across from this property. The neighbors on the east side of Broderick Street are here today, or I'm representing them, because we're not satisfied with the process by which the property in question has gotten to this point. Our main concern is that the project sponsor has had some drawings that were misrepresented, and whether those were done purposefully or not, they were done to obtain a permit to raise the building, and then they were retroactively corrected, essentially with the stroke of a pen. Had the neighbors been presented with the factually correct drawings from the beginning, our reaction to the project when the plans were originally submitted would have been different. And I don't know if you can see this diagram that I brought, but my wife and I joke that this house looks like a partially extracted tooth compared to the rest of the homes that are on that side of the street. Additionally, the project sponsor has broken up elements of the project into separate permits in order to obtain approval that would have otherwise not been possible or likely if the project was presented in its entirety with the facts fully represented up front. And this is something that Irving talked about a moment ago. And some have said that this project is a blueprint for how to circumnavigate the permit process in San Francisco. Now, I know I speak on behalf of all the neighbors when I say that we want to see this building completed as much as anybody else. It's been under construction for several years now. But it's clear that there have been breaches that need to be addressed. And so that's why we're here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I see the other appellant filling the remainder of the time?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Zareski, you have 4 minutes and 50 seconds.
Thank you. What we had requested on behalf of all the neighbors in the area who are concerned with this is, with regard to the height, the building height the building should be lowered between 12 and 18 inches, which would still allow for a garage opening large enough to handle most vehicles. Lowering the structure by this amount also puts the building below the 40-foot height limit. Lowering the house would also allow the garage door opening comparable in height to the other garage doors opening on the block. The neighbors are willing to pay for a structural engineer to help create the plans necessary to lower the house 12 to 18 inches. South Side Yard Alley. Per the agreement signed by the neighbors on September 4th, 2012, no new construction expansion into the south side alleyway. The profile of the building should remain as to that so that the light isn't severely restricted. This includes any new bay windows and other expansions into the space. Rear yard. Return the house to the original profile in the rear and return the historic porch and deck that existed prior to when the construction began. Eliminate any new decks in the rear of the house. No construction in the rear of the house that extends higher than the maximum height in the front of the house, ladder, deck, etc. Eliminate any staircases extended into the rear yard house scheduled to extend closer than 20 feet to the west. Building unit merger. Have the city review the dwelling unit merger appraisal was conducted and whether the values assigned to the two units are accurate. Roof development. No squaring off of the roof to install new dormers, and the neighbors need to see the full plan of the roof development, which has not been shown to us again. Excavation. Review the engineering plans for the drainage and for shoring the lateral support for both the south and north of the property. Assuming DBI can provide a copy of the engineering plans created for excavation, the neighbors are willing to pay for a geotechnical engineer to review the excavation foundation and drainage plan to see how it impacts other historical resources. This goes back to the very issue that is now going on at DBI. In a meeting with Supervisor Farrell, Scott Sanchez from City Planning, Patrick O'Riordan, and Joseph Duffy, We had, in fact, gone over the issues, and they have assigned Ron Tom from DBI to review the entire situation of the multiple permits, the serial permits, and the piecemeal, and to bring it all under one umbrella. This is in conformity with what the Supreme Court called for in such cases. We believe that this should go forth as quickly as possible, and then I'm assured by DBI that they will, in fact, review it, submit it to city planning, who will check for their entitlements, and if new 311 notifications need to be given, they will be given, and then the neighbors will be able to review it with their own engineers. Of crucial concern are the underground streams in that area that we all have. And there is water pooling in many of our homes, and in fact, at the Moorhead's home on Filbert Street, it is pretty surface. We have all had it. The excavation goes to the heart of how the water is going to flow henceforth and what is going to happen to, in fact, to our own foundations as a result. So we are requesting you today to help us preserve historical assets and resources in San Francisco, bring the building back to its exterior envelope, which under the agreement of 2012 was to remain intact, not to change the footprint of the building. No one is against the project sponsor interior development of her building, but we strongly believe that the envelope of the building should remain intact as we agreed, the footprint should remain intact as we agreed, and the building should remain a 2-unit building, although it may be arranged to be convertible into the use of a home. Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to call up any members of the public who would like to support the appeal. They shall have up to 2 minutes each. If you can please line up, come to the podium. Any members of the public who'd like to speak in support of the appeal?
Patricia Voy, Marina Calhoun, Neighbors and Merchants. I never got a notice. I live behind this building of the 311 notices. Number 2 is I equate this case to the same case as the Academy of Art. I have repeatedly heard from neighbors as construction was going on after it had been told not to do it. The expansion, I would like to double check and have someone double check. The light and hair of Don Moorhead on the environmental, he is going to be totally black. They made an exception to the rule on the west side of his house for Agar Jakes, and all of a sudden he's getting dry rot, mold, and other things just because of that. If you raise the building next to on the east side, he's going to have no light and air. Now the streams, the map of the streams is a little bit off, and I would like to see someone come and check it. My problem is this case has gone on very long. The neighbors have a right to have gone through every permit. I've seen smut campaigns, and I firmly believe that this should be sent back to city planning and to the Department of Building Inspection and get a complete handle on what this project really is. I honestly believe I found out there is another drawing that has not been presented to the neighbors. And I think that this is beyond price of what it is. It's the fact that they're not following the rules. The third thing, the last thing, is this going to be really 2 units? Or are they going to do it just like everybody else in Cow Hollow, taking a unit, saying they're building 2 units, and yet not?
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak in support of the appeal? Please make your way up to the podium. Okay, seeing no other members of the public, then I'd like to turn it over to the planning department staff, which will have 10 minutes to describe the grounds for the exemption.
Good afternoon, President Tang and members of the board. My name is Tina Tam. I'm a senior preservation planner for the planning department. Here with me today is Shelley Caltagirone, preservation staff, Joy Navarrete, senior environmental planner, and Sarah Jones, Environmental Review Officer. The project is a dwelling unit merger and exterior changes to a building at 2853 and 57 Broderick Street. This type of project qualifies for a category exemption from environmental review under Section 15301 or Class 1. The appellants have raised a number of different issues that I will touch upon in my presentation, but it's important to note that none of these issues pertain to environmental review. In other words, the appeal letters and subsequent correspondences from the appellants do not present substantial evidence supporting a fair argument that a significant impact may occur as a result of the project. That being said, I want to go over briefly a few of the appellants' concerns. The project violates a settlement agreement made in 2012 between the owner of the property and the neighbors. The project gets too tall and disrupts the pattern on the street. The changes will impact the historic integrity of the building and the adjoining historic resources. The project will eliminate one affordable unit and change the predominant character of the two-unit buildings in the area. The project is inappropriate and visible from the street. And lastly, the proposed garden shed will impact the mid-block open space. The referenced 2012 agreement is a private agreement between the property owner and the neighbors. The planning department is not a signatory party to this agreement, and as such is not responsible for enforcing its terms. Nevertheless, the department feels that the height change of 3 feet is a relatively modest change given the majority of the buildings in the vicinity are between 3 stories and 4 stories in height. The proposed height is within the height limit of the planning code and will not be out of character with the surrounding buildings. The exterior changes are largely at the back of the building and or minimally visible from the street. Even if the appellant's assertion that some or most of the exterior changes are visible, the appellants haven't provided evidence of how the visibility of the additions would cause a significant impact to the environment. As stated in the department's historic resource evaluation response, the project is consistent with the Secretaries of the Interior standards and will not cause any impacts to historic resources. The subject building is a district contributor to an eligible historic district. However, the changes proposed will not result in an impact such that the significance of the resource, in this case a district, would be materially impaired. The building would retain sufficient integrity so that it would continue to convey its historic significance as a First Bay tradition-style building. With regards to the dwelling unit merger, the zoning administrator has already made a ruling that the units are above the affordability thresholds and are not considered affordable by the planning code. Furthermore, the appellants have not explained how the merger would actually change the neighborhood character. Given that the neighborhood is a historic district, the district is significant for its physical attributes and not so for its unit count. With regard to the garden shed at the back of the property, the department has determined, based upon its proposed size, the shed will not trigger a building permit. While the department acknowledges an error made previously in the prior issue permit with regard to the existing height of the building is within the height limit of the planning code, and in any case, the information does not change the fact that the project is appropriately exempt from CEQA. Not only is lifting the building for a new garage consistent with the department's design standards, the lifting of 3 feet already happened, and this permit is merely correcting a discrepancy in the plans. The majority of the appellant's concerns about inconsistency with the design guidelines as they pertain to light and air have already been heard and vetted by the Planning Commission during the DR hearing for the project. The Planning Commission voted on a 7-0 vote to approve the project with no modifications. Currently, there is an appeal hearing pending before the Board of Appeals on the issuance of the building permit. Despite the appellant's additional concerns about the varying number of different permits filed for the property, the fact remains none of these issues raised by the appellants are CEQA issues. Whether the changes are looked at separately or altogether, none of them will result in a significant impact to the environment. For the reasons stated in our appeal response and at this hearing, the department finds the CEQA determination complies with the requirements of CEQA and the project is appropriately exempt from environmental review. While the department appreciates the appellant's concerns, they have not provided any substantial evidence or expert opinion to refute the conclusion of the department. Therefore, the department recommends that the board upholds the category exemption determination and deny the appeal.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions for Planning Department staff? Seeing none, we'll now proceed with the project sponsor, the respondent, to have up to 15 minutes for a presentation.
Good afternoon, Madam President and members. Eileen Dick, Frella, Braun, and Martel on behalf of the project sponsor, Pam Whitehead and Melinda Nijkamp. I want to digress a little bit from my prepared notes, and I want to just say, and I was going to emphasize this later, but had I just walked into this hearing and heard the appellant's position, I would have thought that I must have walked into a hearing either at the Board of Appeals or perhaps at the Planning Commission. And I think the rub here is to proceed with what Ms. Tam just said. None of those issues are CEQA issues. I want to emphasize as well for the members of this board, the neighbors, the appellants here today, this will be the 6th administrative hearing they will have had. There have been 2 Board of Appeal hearings with another one scheduled in January to deal with the release of the suspension of permits that the zoning administrator had done. To also hear an appeal of the curb cut. This is the 2nd CEQA appeal hearing that these folks have had. And what the important thing here today is, as Ms. Tam said, this is about whether substantial evidence has been provided by the appellants that support overturning the department's very reasoned and decision in and of itself that's supported by substantial evidence. So with that said, I'll proceed with my prepared remarks and begin with saying, because of the length of this, and Mr. Zaretsky himself acknowledged that, as well as Mr. Waits, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing his name, this has been going on for 5 years. The interesting point about this is Ms. Whitehead basically grew up around the corner from this house. She was friends with the daughter of the woman who lived in the house at the time the tragic fire occurred, basically displacing this woman. And the fire, we put in previous papers, the fire was caused, it was an arson by her own child. So a very tragic event led to these circumstances. Ms. Whitehead and her partner, who lived in Mill Valley with their 2 children, said, you know what an opportunity. We can move back to the neighborhood where Mom grew up and we can raise our kids here. You don't hear that very often of people saying, I'm going to come back from the suburbs and move to the city to live in San Francisco. That's what happened. Mr. Antoneros, the project architect, had been hired by Ms. Conrad, who was the elderly owner who moved out. Pam and Melinda came in and said, well, we want to create a family home. We don't want a home, again, that needs 2 units. We want to have a home that our family could grow and live in. And that's partly what went on in terms of the allegations of quote-unquote serial permitting. What really happened here is there what was called a change in the program. Clients or owners have different ideas and living norms that they want to achieve in a house, and the architect comes in and makes changes based on that. And again, if you listen to the appellants, you would think DBI and planning were party to this nefarious plot to obtain permits and permits without public review. That's absolutely not true. There have been 2 311 hearings at discretionary review at the Planning Commission. As I said, there's been Board of Appeals hearings. There's been a hearing here. Nothing has been done in anything but sunlight. And I want to end the introduction with saying the reason why this categorical exemption is in front of you based on this permit is the zoning administrator issued a suspension of permits in February of this year and said, I want a complete undertaking in one plan set of everything that's been built and approved, modifications that were approved by the Board of Appeals, and then in the third panel, if you will, everything that is yet to be approved. That's the categorical exemption in front of you today, is the work, the dwelling unit merger, the dormers, the roof decks, those modest expansions that are taking place. With that said, I want to go back in time and take us to the 2012 categorical exemption appeal. As Mr. Zaretsky said, the board didn't hold a hearing on that appeal because there was a settlement agreement that was executed between the parties, yet the board nonetheless affirmed the categorical exemption. And at the time, that categorical exemption, which again has been affirmed by this board, dealt with what seems to be the crux of the neighbor's concern, raising the building by approximately 3 feet to insert a garage at the ground floor level, and then going on to expand the ground floor level towards the rear of the building and creating a new curb cut. So again, in 2012, categorical exemption issued for that permit, that site permit, and then related permits that implemented that work. Fast forward to today, and the categorical exemption in 2012 was based on the same substantial evidence that Planning Department goes through based on staff's long expertise and experience in assessing impacts to historic resources using the guidelines provided by the Secretary of Interior standards. And again, found after a reasoned analysis concluded in 2012, there were no impacts from the height, the curb cut, or the garage insert to the house as a historic resource. We're here today, same appellants, same issues, different scope of work. In fact, a much more modest scope of work, we'd argue. The scope of work for this project, as Ms. Tam said, we've got 2 roof decks, the construction of dormers, a bay at the south, alteration of side and main entry steps, lowering the main entry threshold, adding a transom, and removing rear steps. Once again, the Planning Department engaged in the required CEQA review of the proposed work's potential impact to the home's historic features. And once again, based on substantial evidence that comes with their training and experience, staff found that this work would not have a significant impact on the resource and issued the CAD-X. Staff concluded, in fact, under the Secretary of Interior's guidelines, that the proposed side and rooftop additions, including the decks and dormers, would not negatively impact the character-defining features of the building or the site as they would be constructed towards the rear of the building, which is not visible from the adjacent public rights-of-way. They also concluded the proposed addition, dormers, and roof decks would be constructed with contemporary windows and detailing such that they are distinguishable from the contemporary features. Again, that's another rule or guideline under the Secretary of Interior standards. So based on a thoughtful, reasoned analysis based on substantial evidence, the Planning Department has concluded that there is no significant impact to the historic resource. That's the only question here. This isn't a game of Jeopardy where the appellants are asking the question and asking the Planning Department to say, well, there is an impact or there isn't. The Planning Department looks at the scope of work that's before it, again, goes through the stepwise analysis that they've done, and concluded, as they have here, that there's no significant impact. Substantial evidence, as you have been told and know from previous CEQA appeals, is really the linchpin of your decision here, and I want to recite what substantial evidence is and what it is not to be clear. Substantial evidence is facts, reasonable assumptions predicated on facts, and expert opinions supported by facts. You see the common theme here is there must be facts. What substantial evidence is not is argument, speculation, unsubstantiated opinion or narrative, and evidence which is clearly erroneous or inaccurate, or evidence of social or economic impacts which do not contribute to or are not caused by physical impacts on the environment. I would argue that the appellants have put no substantial evidence in the record, nothing there. They haven't provided any today, to use their example of the potential loss of light, air, and privacy as a result of the height lift. First of all, that was addressed in the 2012 categorical exemption. But again, that the environment in this case is not the impact on people, it is the impact on the house. So the issue here is what has been done to the house that could potentially impact its historic character-defining features. The Planning Department has concluded twice there is nothing, and particularly with respect to the categorical exemption in front of you today, the scope of work is extremely modest, and the Department has concluded, based on substantial evidence, no impact will occur. So I want to, and I will acknowledge that Mr. Zaretsky did in fact put in his papers one page on April 23rd. It was entitled CEQA Issues. All the bullet points, again, had nothing to do with CEQA issues. They were, again, trying to capture that there was, again, a potential impact to the people because of loss of light, air, and privacy. These are not, like his statements today, these are not substantial evidence. They're unsubstantiated opinion. There was no expert evidence offered. They could have gone out if they wanted, obtained a historic expert. They did not. They simply are relying on their own beliefs and their understandings, which under CEQA doesn't rise to the level of being substantial evidence to challenge and then overturn the the Planning Department's CEQA decision. So as you obviously surmise, the real issue here is the height of the building and the permits. Nobody has hidden anything. Again, there was a discretionary review hearing at the Planning Commission in 2011 on the height of the building. Planning Department didn't take DR. There was a Board of Appeals hearing on that permit. The Board of Appeals didn't modify the height. The Board of Appeals dealt with some minor modifications on the side. The permit, the CADX before you today, is based again on a permit that the zoning administrator asked to be prepared in order for the suspension to be lifted, and it is that the showing the existing as-built conditions, the conditions that were approved by the Board of Appeals, and the yet-to-be-approved conditions. That plan was DR'd by Mr. Zaretsky and Mr. Arcuri. So to say that they were not aware of those plans is just patently not true. They filed discretionary review requests after the planning department had provided them 30 days notice with the plan set. They came, they made their arguments, again, many of the same arguments you've heard today about the height, all of it being unlawful, and then Mr. Zaretsky, quite frankly, went into a discussion about how his civil rights were being violated. The Planning Commission, again, voted 7-0 to deny the discretionary review request. They then filed this CEQA appeal. At the same time, when the zoning administrator released the suspension of the permits that were the basis of the permit on which the CAT-X is based, they appealed that suspension. That will be heard by the Board of Appeals. And quite frankly, everything that they've raised today is properly before the Board of Appeals. They are the body that the Charter grants exclusive authority to deal with disputes regarding issuance of permits. And because they can review permits de novo, they have a wide-ranging purview of what they can do. When the permit that is subject to this CAT-X is finally issued by DBI, which cannot happen unless and until there's a final categorical exemption, which would require you to deny the appeal today, that permit will also be appealed to the Board of Appeals, and they too will make a decision on whatever allegations the appellants want to raise. You don't have the authority, as you know, to deal with the permits. You can't lower the height. I know there was Mr. Zaretsky went through their list of quote-unquote demands. The settlement agreement that was executed in 2012, we can argue both parties have breached, and we can go on and on about that, but the bottom line is it's a private agreement. If anybody wants to enforce it, they're free to go to court. Mr. Zaretsky made the same argument to the Planning Commission that he made to you today, that the city should be a party to it. The city is not a party to it, can't change that, therefore the city can't enforce it. Again, none of these are CEQA issues. None of these rise to the level of substantial evidence. Based on CEQA and Admin Code Section 3116B-6, you'd have to find, because there is absolutely no substantial evidence in the record provided by the appellants, you have to find this CEQA document is adequate and sufficient and independent, and you should deny the appeal and uphold the categorical exemption. Thank you very much.
Seeing no questions for the project sponsors, I'd like to invite any members of the public who are supporting. Yes.
I'm sorry, Madam President. The project architect is here. I'd like to give him, I think I had 3 minutes and some seconds remaining. If
you
possible.
may proceed.
Thank you, Madam.
Good afternoon, Madam President and Supervisors. I was hoping to get out of talking, but do I have 7.5 minutes?
You have 3 minutes remaining.
Oh, sorry. There's a long history to this project. I'm looking forward to it being over. I think it's very unfortunate that it's come back to this body. It's especially unfortunate that the appellant continues to persist after so many complaints, all of which have been addressed. It's very frustrating for me as the architect on this project that I have to get up here and defend that it's okay to have lowered the door 18 inches. Really, I think everybody has missed that, including the planning department. The focus of this CEQA is about lowering the front door 18 inches and lowering the door on the porch that is visible from the street 3 feet after the building was raised, because those things are visible from the street. The dormers in the back are behind the roof. They are not visible from the street. Everything else the appellant has brought up, as Eileen Dick has mentioned, are subject to permitting issues. All of those permitting issues are being handled now with the building department. He continues to obstruct the process by asking for more things. The project sponsor continues to address them, and more complaints arise. I've had it.
Thank you. And now at this time, I would like to call up any members of the public who wish to support the project sponsors. You shall have up to 2 minutes each. So if there is anyone here from the public, please line up. Last call. All right, seeing none, then our hearing under item 37 has been held and is now closed. Items 38 and 40 are now in the hands. Oh, I apologize. Let me take that back and just offer the appellants the opportunity for rebuttal for 5 minutes total. So if the appellants would like to split again the 5 minutes for rebuttal, you may do so at this time.
Appellants were very pleased to have had an agreement after 4 months that the project sponsor bought the building to start construction and build the home that she wanted to build. What is behind this issue is a backstory. As the appellant bought that building, 2821 Broderick was bought by another individual, a 2-unit building. And that individual proceeded to remodel. It was bought at the same time for $3,560,000. It was remodeled for a couple of years and remained as a 2-unit building, but convertible into a home. It was then sold recently for $11.1 million. This is a dollars and cents issue. What you see happening here is the building out of history, out of homes in San Francisco for greed and profit. I think it is important for us to remember that diversity of housing, allowing a diversity of individuals to live in a neighborhood, whether they are middle class or upper middle class or whatever they are, is a blessing. It allows the kind of neighborhood that we have always had in Cow Hollow. Well, the movement afoot right now is to take all the historic homes, build the history out of them, blow them out in all directions, and create mansions that then can be sold for an incredible amount of money. It will create a lower density in Cow Hollow, but it will make a golden ghetto. And the kind of home that we enjoyed for 50 years in Cow Hollow, the kind of diversity, the kind of wonderful neighbors that we have had, that's going to be gone. And the issue whether this is in fact an impact on people rather than on building is false. I think that Mr. Moorhead could testify to what happens when buildings are raised to such a degree and there's no air and light. You can see what happens afterwards with underground streams when the water is backed up and it's pulling in our foundations and on our backyards. You can see, in fact, what's happening when rooftops are expanded to such a degree that, in fact, you don't have the kind of environment that you had once before. The point of the matter is that this issue should have never happened had the project sponsor followed the rules. That's what we have asked all along. Follow the rules. Had she gone on July 1st, 2013, corrected her plans and came back on a notice to their neighbors, we could have been done in very short order. But in fact, no one knows what she really wants to do. When I met with Ron Tom this past Friday, and he told me that he had asked them to bring in their materials. They brought the plans and the permits. And he and one of their top engineers, Diane Yin, went through to look at it, and he said to me, Mr. Zaretsky, we could not decipher an alignment between the permits, the plans, the work that has been done, the work in progress, and the work that is to be done. Henceforth, they asked them, bring us clear, distinct plans so that we can see what this project is about. This is in fact what happens and why the Supreme Court in the Laurel Heights case over 25 years ago said that in CEQA issues, the neighborhood should have the totality, the holistic, the whole view of what the project is about. The question of lowering the doors by 18 inches, and that's one of the permits that was withdrawn, apparently has found a new life. I am sure that as we get through with this hearing, new permits will emerge because that is the modus operandi of this particular project sponsor. Therefore, I ask of you to consider that, in fact, what we are asking is the preservation of the neighborhood, preservation of diversity among our residents. We're asking for families to return to San Francisco, of course, but I will tell you, you're looking at one individual who was raised in a flat and yet turned out to be a pretty good person. Out of Lowell High School and out of the University of California and Stanford and University of Chicago and Princeton and Yale and several other places. I think our supervisor was raised in a flat. I think that we ought to remember that there are other ways to live except in mansions.
Thank you. Now at this time, our hearing under item 37 has been held and is closed. And now items 38 and 40 are in the hands of the board. Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Zaretsky, not only a flat, but a flat on Broderick Street as well. So, colleagues, in terms of this, what we have in front of us, this is obviously the second CEQA appeal on the project. We've been working on this for years. I want to thank Catherine Stephanie from my office for all of her time, an incredible amount of time on this project itself over the years. We did work the first time around where there was a signed agreement between the neighbors and Mr. Zaretsky and the project sponsor that allowed us to avoid a prior CEQA process in the end. Since then, new plans and applications have come up that were submitted. To rectify that, the planning department had the project sponsor consolidate everything into a permanent issue, a new notice earlier this year. The neighbors, as was mentioned, neighbors filed the DR that was not taken by the Planning Commission. And this today, what's in front of us is a CADX appeal regarding to the project that was approved in July at the Planning Department. Over the last few weeks, we continued this at this board a few weeks ago till today. My office and I did personally met with both the neighbors, and I want to thank Mr. Zaretsky and all the neighbors for coming, as well as planning and DBI, and everyone else from the city staff who was there, and also met with the project sponsor and her attorney to discuss the concerns. As we all do, attempted to broker a compromise as well between the neighbors and the project sponsor. Unfortunately, this time around was unsuccessful as much as we tried. I will say that overall, I have a number of issues with how this has been handled over the years, this project, including how the project sponsor has or has not worked with the neighbors, and I understand there's frustrations on both ends. I will say I think the neighbors are very fortunate to have had Mr. Zaretsky bird-dogging this issue, if you would call it that, over the last few years, and I know we continue to do so. I believe these issues that were raised need to be looked at, and I do wish a compromise could have been reached, and I understand the frustration. That all being said, as many times we find ourselves here at the Board of Supervisors, our hands are tied here. We have to look about an environmental issue right now. There are a number of issues that were raised that are very germane to the Board of Appeals, and I've looked, and I just, in good faith, cannot say that there's an environmental issue here with this project that should overturn the Planning Department's decision and all their multiple reviews from an environmental perspective. Whether it be the lifting of the property, the height issue is one of the major issues, and I understand the concern and understand exactly what happened here. The unit merger, understand concerns around that. Again, that's a permitting issue, not here as an environmental issue at the Board of Supervisors. We have very strict limitations in terms of how we can look at this. At the end of the day, DBI is going to be reviewing plans. If there's anything new that gets submitted, it gets referred to planning. And we all spoke with Scott Sanchez from planning. I want to thank him for his hard work on this. If there's anything more, planning will take a new review on this. And if it's substantially different than what there is today, then it's going to be looked at for another 3-1 notice and another environmental go-through. I want to be clear. For me, this is far from a stamp of approval on this project. I wish it was handled differently. I'm very, very frustrated as someone who spent a lot of personal time on it, my staff, a ton of time on this issue. But again, in my opinion, we're tasked with one job and one job only today, and that's to determine whether the Planning Department appropriately determined this project had a CADX from CEQA. And I just don't see any evidence to the contrary at all, despite my reservations on the project as a whole and what's been happening. So, colleagues, with that being said, I'm going to make a motion to affirm the determination of item 38 and table items 39 and 40.
So motion seconded by Supervisor Campos. All right. So colleagues, can we take this same house, same call, or do we need a roll call vote? All right. So the motion has been made to affirm item 38 without objection. The determination of the categorical exemption determined by the Planning Department is now affirmed. And now item 39. Madam Clerk, if you could read our second 3 p.m. special order, please.
Pursuant to a motion approved on November 18th, the Board of Supervisors will convene a committee of the whole for items 41 through 42. A public hearing to consider the proposed resolution. The Board of Supervisors, acting in its capacity as the successor agency to the former redevelopment agency, to approve actions, the subject of item 42, actions by the Commission on Community Investment and Infrastructure to subordinate a property interest in a site designated for affordable housing in the Transbay redevelopment project area for the construction of the Transbay Transit Center.
Thank you. For this item, I'd like to first offer the opportunity for the district supervisor and sponsor, Supervisor Kim, for some comments, preceded by Department Representative from OCII, Ms. Tiffany Bohe. So with that, Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, Chair Tang. The series of resolutions being considered today will enable Transbay Joint Powers Authority to pursue a bridge loan financing for the construction of Phase 1 of the Transbay Transit Center. TJPA has a federal infrastructure loan, often referred to as the TIFIA loan, to cover these funding needs. However, TJPA is not able to draw down on the TIFIA loan until certain conditions are met. We are currently on track to meet those conditions in late 2015. However, this bridge loan is needed to cover construction costs in the interim. Many of my colleagues will remember some of my concerns that come up over the fact that we really operate almost month to month in terms of our cash flow during some of the controversies over the Melrose district back in September. To this end, TJPA has negotiated a bridge loan with Goldman Sachs, but this legislation is necessary to close the loan. It allows OCII and the city to subordinate specified interests related to certain parcels of land owned by TJPA in order to use these parcels as collateral for the bridge loan. It makes a finding that the bridge loan will result in significant public benefits because it allows TJPA to timely undertake construction of Phase 1 of the Transbay project, which is incredibly important. The loan will be repaid as soon as TJPA draws down on the TIFIA loan. The interest costs for the anticipated 12-month loan program can be covered within our existing Phase 1 budget. The Budget and Legislative Analyst Office has determined that this legislation has no fiscal impact on the city, and the legislation was unanimously approved by the Budget and Finance Committee on November 19th. It is important to note that regardless of the repayment status of the bridge loan, development of these parcels would still be subject to the operative affordable housing requirements in the Transbay Redevelopment Area Plan, the highest of which we've seen in our city at 35%. I urge my colleagues to support these resolutions so the interim construction funding can proceed. We do have members of both TJPA and OCII in hand, and I see our director, Tiffany Bohe, to speak on behalf of our successor agency. Director Bohe.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. President Tang, supervisors. As the district supervisor indicated, we do recommend your approval of these transaction documents, both in your legislative capacity as the city, as well as your capacity as the successor agency to the redevelopment agency. As Supervisor Kim outlined, this bridge loan does allow the development of certain parcels, primarily an office parcel, Parcel F, and redevelopment Block 4, to go forward while this bridge loan is outstanding. And even in a worst case scenario, if the unlikely event happens that the lender forecloses on the property, which we do not think is likely, those same redevelopment requirements, including the substantial affordable housing requirement that would be enforced, really travel and run with the land. But nonetheless, we do expect, the TJPA expects the bridge loan to be repaid in approximately 1 year. After the board's consideration of this transaction, the State Department of Finance will review it, as well as the Oversight Board, and this bridge loan is expected to close in January. So with that, that concludes my presentation. Members of the TJPA, Scott Boulay, Sarah Gelati, as well as Claudia Gorham with the City's Department of Real Estate are also here for any questions you might have.
Colleagues, do we have any more questions or comments for any of the staff present here today? Supervisor Kim? No. Okay. So with that, then we have items 41 and 42 before us. And we'd like to take public comment on those two items. Any members of the public, if you wish to speak, you have 2 minutes. Please come to the podium. Seeing none, public comment is closed for this item. And now, colleagues, we have items 41 and 42 before us. Any further discussion? All right. All right, so our hearing has been held and closed. And now 41 and 42, if we could take that same 42. If we could take that same house, same call, without objection. Oh, I'm sorry. Our house has changed. Now we're going to have to go to roll call vote. Madam Clerk.
Okay. On item 42, Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee. Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Aye. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed. Aye. Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos. Campos, absent. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. There are 9 ayes.
That resolution is adopted. And Madam Clerk, to our third special 3 p.m. order.
Pursuant to a motion approved on November 25th, the Board of Supervisors will convene a committee of the whole for items 43 through 45 for a public hearing to consider a resolution, item 43, to authorize the execution of the First Amendment to the option agreement for the purchase and sale of real property and execute a consent to the conditions of the Trans-Bay Joint Powers Authority's bridge loan with a value of $171 million not to exceed amount from Goldman Sachs Bank USA to the Trans-Bay Joint Powers Authority. And item 44 is the resolution. Item 45 is the resolution to authorize the Director of Property to execute the First Amendment to the option for the purchase and sale of real property between the City Trans-Bay Joint Powers Authority and the successor agency to the Redevelopment Agency to execute and consent to the conditions of the bridge loan with the value of $171 million.
So, colleagues, for items 43 and 44, I'd like to offer Supervisor Kim if she has any other additional comments, but we did hear this, the nature of this item through 41 and 42, but in 41 and 42 had to sit as the successor agencies to the Redevelopment Agency. So at this time, I'd like to see if Supervisor Kim has any comments or any other members of the department. Seeing none, then, public comment on item 43. Any members of the public wish to speak? Seeing none, public comment is closed, and the hearing is held and filed for item 43. Item 44 is before us at the board. 44 and 45, and since our house has changed, let's take a roll call vote on items 44 and 45.
Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee. Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed. Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim.
Aye.
Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. There are 10 ayes.
These resolutions are unanimously adopted. Item 46.
Item 46 was considered by the Neighborhood Services and Safety Committee at a rescheduled meeting on December 4th at 3 p.m. and was recommended as amended with the same title and forwarded as a committee report. It's an ordinance to amend the health code by adding density, proximity, and sales establishment limitations on granting of new tobacco sales permits and renumbering all sections in Article 19H, amending the Business and Tax Regulations Code by increasing the annual license and application fees and making the environmental findings.
Supervisor Marr.
Thank you, President Tang. Colleagues, this item is a major historic act. I call it the Tobacco Sales Reduction Act. It will help us reduce tobacco permits, tobacco sales by 1/2 over a 10 to 15 year period in our city. I wanted to thank the co-sponsors, the early co-sponsors, Supervisors Jane Kim and Scott Weiner, but also recent and current co-sponsors David Campos, our former president David Chu, Supervisor Avalos, and Supervisor Yee and Cohen as well for co-sponsoring. This is an important piece of legislation that's youth-driven that came out of 6 years of work by the Tobacco Use Reduction Force of the Youth Leadership Institute and many other youth-led organizations. So it's really an important example of bottom-up youth-led laws created in cities to create better health equity for our communities. It really is about protecting kids and schools and vulnerable communities from smoking and targeting and marketing by big tobacco corporations. It will help us reduce gradually tobacco permits to have healthier and cleaner air in our communities as well. And this is the most comprehensive tobacco controls on tobacco licenses of any city in this country. This policy is a lot of hard work. Nick Pagalatos from my staff worked hard with Department of Public Health staff, but especially being educated by the young leaders from our communities. Many neighborhoods were represented as they testified, and we passed this unanimously at the Neighborhood Services and Safety Committee last week. My hats go off also to the Youth Leadership Institute for their tireless focus. Avni Desai, Patricia Barhona, and others from YLI to really empower young people with strong skills in organizing, action research, and effective advocacy here at City Hall. So my hat is off, and tremendous props and respect to the young people. Without their efforts, we wouldn't be here today. But it's been 6 years of work, though, as it was emphasized in our committee. In San Francisco, our low-income communities, communities of color, and communities with a large number of young people we have a disproportionate concentration of tobacco permits or the selling of cigarettes and tobacco products compared to other neighborhoods. This targeting of young people of color by the tobacco industry is a social justice issue to me, and it has yet to be adequately addressed by our city. For example, District 6, Supervisor Jane Kim's district, which includes the Tenderloin and South of Market neighborhoods, had approximately 270 of the 1,000 permits in our city. So that's about a quarter in just one of our districts. That was in 2011, compared to only 37 permits in the Sunset and about 50 in the Marina. But I think the examples are stark, and it's about health equity that's driving this legislation. 3 of our city's lowest income districts also had the highest concentration of tobacco retail outlets. South of Market, District 6, District 9, Supervisor Campos' district, and Potrero Hill, Bayview Hunters Point, District 10, Supervisor Cohen's district. We know that tobacco and cigarette use is a leading cause of preventable death in San Francisco, and thanks so much to our Department of Public Health leadership for really emphasizing that, but also giving good policy recommendations to us to follow through with, along with community-based organizations. Our Tobacco Free Coalition has been working with the young people and our Department of Public Health, and I wanted to give props to our broad and diverse Tobacco Free Coalition in our city. They emphasize the economic impacts also. Nearly $400 million a year is spent on health costs related to cigarettes and tobacco. That's approximately $625 per person in our city each year spent on the impacts of tobacco and cigarettes. Also, UCSF and Stanford researchers recently gave us their up-to-date research that shows that the greater exposure to tobacco outlets, the more likely a neighborhood is at risk for tobacco-related death and disease and premature death as well of low-income communities. Also, higher exposure to tobacco density, so that's the more higher concentrations of tobacco permits and sales. That tobacco density also results in increased youth smoking rates as well. So this is about limiting access, but also reducing the big tobacco's efforts to hook young people on cigarettes, but also the new industries of e-cigarettes as well. This legislation over time, as I said, will cut our tobacco permits in half over 10 to 15 years, according to our estimates. Through attrition and reducing the number of tobacco licenses throughout San Francisco. It does it by creating a cap of 45 licenses per district, and that cap was calculated by looking at the density in neighborhoods and to not allow neighborhoods to go above the existing cap. It takes nothing away from existing businesses, but it's really looking at not letting them grow higher and to be reduced by attrition over time. In addition, any new permits must be located at least 500 feet away from schools, so it's protecting kids and limiting access close to schools. It's also limiting permits 500 feet away from an existing tobacco retailer. Like different pieces of legislation from District 11 and other districts, it's limiting clustering of the tobacco outlets selling cigarettes and other harmful products to young people and to vulnerable communities as well. No new permits also are allowed in any restaurants and bars. That's a new trend where restaurants and bars seek permits to sell in addition to alcohol and other stuff too. And no new permits are allowed in any new location. So it's reducing over time drastically in half within a 10 to 15 year period according to our estimates. It also includes key provisions that will protect the business owners. So there's small businesses that we've worked with, especially the Arab American Grocers Association and others, to give us input. So we're protecting small business owners by preserving the value of their stores and allowing them to sell their businesses without being adversely impacted by these new regulations. Yesterday, the Small Business Commission gave us a number of recommendations, and I have 3 amendments that have been given out to everyone to address some of those concerns that were given to us by small business commissioners and Director Regina Dick-Andresi. In response, I'm going to be incorporating these minor amendments today. The first is it allows applications for new permits submitted for approval by the director by today's date. So if somebody is submitting a permit by today's date, they're not subject to any of the requirements. Also, cigar bars, Occidental Cigar Bar, the owner came and testified that they were subject to the exemption in the Health Code section 1009.23E, and that their cigar bar for 5 consecutive years can sell their bar to a new buyer who in turn sells to a subsequent buyer of the cigar bar after 10 years of consecutive ownership. Both can obtain new permits on a one-time basis. It's only a couple of cigar bars that are being included in this amendment. Also, the last one is spouses and domestic partners who acquire a tobacco sales permit or establishment through death or divorce are exempt from the new permit limits on a one-time basis that allows children of owners and now spouses and domestic partners to have that benefit. So this Tobacco Sales Reduction Act was crafted again in coordination with a number of stakeholder groups. And I thank again the Arab American Grocers Association, especially Miriam Zazounis and the leadership of the Arab American Grocers. I wanted to thank Susanna Hennessy Lavery, especially for her leadership, and others from the Department of Public Health, and especially the community advocates and the youth leaders. The Tobacco Sales Reduction Act also is part of a coordinated approach that includes Healthy Retail SF, which we enacted earlier this year, that allows us to help transform corner stores for health equity and supporting small independent businesses and strengthening partnerships and strengthening a healthier community. I wanted to thank my co-sponsors again, Supervisors Kim Weiner and former President Chu, Supervisors Avalos, Yi, and Campos, and Cohen for their co-sponsorship. And lastly, Patricia Barahona from Youth Leadership Institute for really nurturing the young leaders, and Amanda Trescott and Avni Desai as well from YLI. Also, the youth leaders from the Tobacco Use Reduction Force, all 3 generations of the youth leaders. I wanted to thank from Arab American Grocers, Shahib Khaleh, Kamal Karaha, and Miriam Zazounis. I wanted to also thank from Department of Public Health, besides Susanna, Derek Smith for his real insights and help in drafting this, and our Deputy City Attorney, Alita Van Runkel, for amazing work in this legislation. Lastly, I wanted to give tremendous respect to the young people and read off the names of the Tobacco Use Reduction Force leaders. From 2008, we had Lena Tam Lee, Joshua Pooner, Hector Echeverria, Brian Stegner, Luisa Sicaros, or our Youth Commissioner Luisa Sicaros, Cecilia Ramirez Moody, Carlos Figueroa, Fahad Qurashi, who testified last week, Jesus Sicaros for his tremendous leadership in our neighborhoods. 2011 TURF cohort was also Amanda Trescott, Jesus Sicaros, Malaysia Sanders, who's been an amazing leader among young people in our city, Leanne Chrisman, Shanake Cruz, and Richard Rodrigo. And the 2014 TURF cohort, the new folks, Samarit Bayen and Narelle Knowles, who was an amazing O'Connell High School ninth grader who testified last week. And lastly, Brenda Wu. All the TURF youth leaders are amazing, and the Youth Commission in supporting them as well. So colleagues, I urge your support for these amendments and support for this historic legislation led by young people in our city to make our communities healthier. Thank you.
Thank you. So Supervisor Mar has made an amendment to this legislation, seconded by Supervisor Kim. Now Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I want to thank Supervisor Mar's office for all of their work on this legislation. And I also want to commend all the young people that brought this ordinance to us. Actually, I believe in 2012 was when I first sat down with many of maybe then high school students, no longer, to talk about this really pressing issue. And it was an important, I really got educated through this process, meeting with young people, not just on the importance of this issue. I think we all understand the importance of decreasing the consumption of cigarette usage, in particular its exposure to young people and also in low-income neighborhoods. But I had no idea the huge discrepancy in terms of tobacco permits throughout our city. In District 6, as Eric Marr mentioned, where we have the lowest median household income in the city at $38,000, we have 270 tobacco permits, 270 tobacco permits just in our district. And in comparison to District 7, not to point this out, but in a great way, in District 7, represented by Norman Yee, only 37 permitted tobacco retailers. And so the huge inequity that we see in terms of the access to tobacco and liquor in our neighborhoods, in the Tenderloin and the South of Market, certainly has a huge impact on the young people that live in our district. And certainly many of the youth leaders live in our neighborhoods. And I just wanted to appreciate your leadership. I thought that this would be a very challenging piece of legislation. And they took it on. And over 2 years, they actually met with a lot of members of the community, but also the small business community like the Arab American Grocers Association, brought them on board with the legislation. And now we have before us something where there is very little opposition, but just widespread community support. And that just shows how important that groundwork was to establish a really strong policy that's coming before us today. So thank you so much for all of your work. This is going to make a huge impact over many, many years for San Francisco. This is absolutely the type of legislation we want to pass. Often we talk about how we can make our neighborhoods safer, and I think a huge part of that is changing the small business models that we have in our city. And oftentimes, actually, the small business owners don't want to just profit from selling tobacco and alcohol, but they just don't know any other type of business that works. And I just really appreciate DPH and our community members with the Corner Store campaign, converting our liquor stores to healthy corner stores and showing our small business owners that you can also profit by selling to seniors and families and youth vegetables and bread and meat, all those things that we often don't have access to in neighborhoods that are known as food deserts. And so I really believe that these types of incremental change in our neighborhood is going to make our neighborhood safer. I think that there's a direct correlation between violence, with public safety, with criminal activities, with the types of physical elements that exist in our neighborhood. And as we see tobacco permits decrease in the Tenderloin, I really, really believe that we are going to be building a safer and stronger and healthier neighborhood. So thank you to all of you that have worked on this, and thank you, Supervisor Marr, for your leadership in moving this forward.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr.
Yeah, I just wanted to give another thank you to Nick Pagalatos from my staff that's worked so hard with the young people, really respecting their leadership, Department of Public Health, really working respectfully with the Arab American grocers and small business owners to be supportive of them as well, so that their input was really a key, as Supervisor Kim mentioned, driving part of this. But really it was the relationships that Nick Pagalatos built with the Arab American grocers that allowed us to work respectfully with them. I wanted to say in props to the young people that there's a new generation that are using the hashtag I Can't Breathe in talking about police misconduct, and I don't want to belittle that. I think it's amazing what's happening around this country, but I'll say that the Turf Wildlife Youth and new youth organizations that are sprouting up saying I can't breathe because of smoking and because of secondhand smoke or environmental injustice and pollution in neighborhoods. It's a growing movement. And I think this piece of legislation, the youth did the research, they did their homework, they brought it to us, and YLI is really deserving of tremendous credit because I think this will spread to other cities as we look at key strategies and policy proposals to really drastically limit smoking. And I think this is going to be seen as a historic day. So I say it's an I Can't Breathe moment, not only for youth movements around this country, but also for healthier communities. So protecting kids, protecting vulnerable communities, and giving stronger voice and empowerment to young people. So thank you so much to all the leaders that are in here, and I urge your strong and hopefully unanimous support, colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. And just to confirm with our Deputy City Attorney, the amendments do not require a continuance.
Deputy City Attorney John Givner, that's right. You can adopt the amendments and pass the ordinance on first reading today.
Thank you for the clarification. So with that, colleagues, we can first take the amendment, and if we could take that without objection. The amendment has been adopted, and now on the underlying item, item 46, if we could take that same house, same call. Without objection, that ordinance has been adopted on first reading as amended unanimously. And Madam Clerk, item 47.
At this time, Supervisor Tang, you are the first to introduce new business.
Thank you. So colleagues, today I'm introducing a resolution regarding pedestrian safety. As we know, it is a huge concern for all of our districts throughout the entire city. And as you all know, the city has adopted our Vision Zero 3-point plan this past March to reduce traffic fatalities to zero by 2024 through a combination of engineering, education, and enforcement. And although our city is working towards addressing pedestrian safety, we believe that adherence to our traffic laws still remains an issue. So today I'm introducing a resolution that I hope will assist in enforcement efforts by urging the California Judicial Council to reevaluate its fines and related fees for violations of certain sections of the California Vehicle Code. In its focus on the 5 campaign, the San Francisco Police Department's current enforcement strategy targets enforcement of 5 California Vehicle Code sections, and they touch upon red light violations, basic speed laws, stop sign violations, pedestrian right-of-way violations, and failure to yield while turning violations. In addition to these 5 dangerous behaviors, our office has also heard numerous complaints from constituents who have been injured while boarding or exiting muni vehicles by the unsafe passing of vehicles, or who have been in collisions with distracted drivers on their cell phones. After we investigated the fines related to these violations, our office discovered that several of them have base fines that are comparably low to other offenses. For instance, while the base fine for running a stop sign, violating a pedestrian's right-of-way, failing to yield while turning, and unsafe passing of a standing streetcar is $35, the base fine for overtaking a vehicle stopped for pedestrians or violating a red light is $100. Given that the top factors for vehicle collisions with pedestrians or bicyclists in San Francisco includes pedestrian right-of-way violations and improper turnings, I'm asking that the Judicial Council to reevaluate its fines for these dangerous behaviors. So as we all know, increasing fines is certainly not something that we believe is the only solution to this. We believe that it'll take a very comprehensive approach. So I want to thank co-sponsor Supervisor Kim on this resolution, and of course, look forward to working with the numerous stakeholders devoted to reducing pedestrian fatalities in San Francisco. With that, I submit.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Yee.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Today, colleagues, I would like to instruct the City Attorney to draft legislation prohibiting tour vehicle drivers from driving and providing tour at the same time. Distracted driving is a dangerous epidemic in our city streets and has led to many fatalities, including one which took the life of Priscilla Moreto, a city employee of our controller's office. Miss Moreto was hit by a motorized cable car in a crosswalk in front of our building. I am committed to improving safety on our streets, and this is the first steps towards that goal. Also today, colleagues, another step I am taking to make our streets safer is to request our budget analysts to analyze how much it would cost to install a black box into every city vehicle, every vehicle in our city fleet. This is an idea that came out of a symposium that Supervisor Kim and myself were at in New York a few weeks ago, in which New York City, which has thousands and thousands and thousands of city vehicles, each one of those vehicles are equipped with this black box. I want to tell you a little story. In 2011 in New York, a city employee, actually he's a politician, was fortunate as in a car accident. The employee was not seriously hurt, and he told the police he was wearing a seatbelt and was not speeding. Well, this case put this employee at the center of a growing debate over a little-known but increasingly important piece of equipment buried deep inside a car, the event data recorder, more commonly known as the black box. Well, from the information recorded by this black box, a different story soon emerged. The driver was actually driving 100 miles an hour and was not wearing a seatbelt, according to the computer in his car that tracks the certain actions. It's why I tell this story. I mean, these black boxes can provide critical safety information and help evaluate what happened during a crash and what future steps could be taken to save lives and prevent injuries. Other potential benefits of these systems include reduced fuel costs and insurance premiums, reduced time for settling claims, vehicle mechanical problems diagnostics, the ability to detect at-risk drivers in risky situations, notifications of drivers in distress, for example, a crash occurred, and the ability to make suggestions to improve driving habits. I think installing this piece of equipment in our city fleet will make our streets safer and drivers more aware of their driving behavior. So thank you for your time on this particular item. I also wanted to talk about this other piece when that was brought to my office earlier this month by the San Francisco Youth Commission's Immigration and Employment Committee, and who would be introducing a resolution urging the city to provide fee waivers for San Francisco youth who qualified for deferred action for childhood arrivals. In 2012, President Obama announced the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, known as DACA, that would allow undocumented youth between the ages of 15 and 30 that came to the United States before the age of 16 and are currently in school, graduated, or in the military to defer any action on their immigration proceedings and to apply for work authorization. While we are still fighting for a pathway to citizenship for all 11.5 undocumented Americans, DACA has proven to be life-changing for 11,000 undocumented youth in the Bay Area alone. These are youth who will no longer have to fear deportation and will have the opportunity to legally work. Applying for DACA costs $465 per application, with only fee waivers for extreme circumstances. DACA recipients must renew their status every 2 years and must pay an additional $465 in fees to reapply. For a low-income family or for a young person who is in school, this can be a significant cost. And since there is no type of relief for family members of DACA recipients, many of these young people are not only supporting themselves, but their families who are still at risk of being deported. In San Francisco, we have a robust network of community and legal organizations who offer free support for our undocumented residents. However, it's still a struggle for many young people and their families to pay for the fees. And with the rising costs of living in our city, this could mean choosing between rent or tuition or food in order to maintain protection from deportation. I agree with the youth commissioners that asking these young people for additional $465 just 2 years after being approved can be an economic burden. Therefore, I am working with the budget and legal analysts to analyze the cost of creating a program for DACA recipients who are struggling to pay for their renewal fees. Preliminary estimates show that supporting the renewal fees for the approximately 1,900 San Francisco DACA residents eligible for renewal would be under $1 million through the next year. I really want to commend, as earlier Supervisor Mar and Supervisor Kim were talking about young people. Here it is again, young people bringing some awareness to their Board of Supervisors. I wanted to commend them, the Youth Commission, and the committee chair, my own District 7 appointee, Joyce Wu, for putting this resolution forward and for uplifting the concerns that many undocumented youth face on a day-to-day basis. I also want to acknowledge that our city is historically a sanctuary city for immigrants, and I'm looking forward to working with many of you on supporting efforts of implementing the latest executive action announced by President Obama last month. Thank you very much. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Yee. Supervisor Breed.
Thank you, colleagues. Today I have 2 items for introduction. The first is a planning code change. The first is planning code changes, which I'm calling the parking flexibility ordinance. For a long time, the city had very strict minimum parking requirements, meaning when someone built new housing, they were required to include parking for all of their new residents. This led to the construction of a lot of parking lots, both above and below the ground, as well as parking pads in what would otherwise be green spaces or yards, and the use of buildings' first floors for vehicle parking instead of active retail or housing. In the past decade or so, with the push for more green space and more engaging ground floors, the city has implemented greater flexibility in its parking requirements. Space-efficient parking methods like tandem parking, lifts, stackers, and valet are now permitted by right. And minimum parking requirements in many of our denser, walkable, transit-rich neighborhoods have been relaxed. These changes have been very effective, and it is important to point out they do not limit anyone's ability to construct parking if they choose. They simply give people more options. It is about flexibility, not mandates. And the ordinance I'm introducing today will provide yet more flexibility so builders, businesses, and homeowners can have more say in where and if they put parking on their property. My legislation allows the conversion of existing parking to active street fronting uses, facilitates the use of space-efficient parking and the conversion of the free space of other uses. It minimizes conflicts with transit and bike lanes and helps restore front and rear yards and encourages other neighborhood building practices. As with anything planning code related, it's easy to get lost in the weeds, so I will just highlight a few of the key elements. First is the issue of floor area ratio, or FAR. FAR limits how much square footage someone can build on a given parcel of land. So if you have 10,000 square foot parcel, maybe you can build 20,000 square feet of retail or offices. Yet currently, parking does not count towards FAR. In other words, there are limits on how much commercial space or housing you can have, but you can build all the parking that you want. And if you have existing parking spaces and you no longer need FAR, may prevent you from converting those spaces to other uses. Neighborhood commercial districts and other city policies encourage ground floor activity, but FAR and parking minimums almost force people to use this ground floor as parking, which I experienced a lot as a former redevelopment agency commissioner when we approved many of these projects. There is a limited amount of space available in a building envelope. Why force it to be used as parking? Do we really want to prioritize parking over jobs and housing? My legislation will make it so that above ground, accessory parking will count towards a building's gross floor area. The permitted amount of underground parking will remain exempt from FAR. This will encourage new developments to put their parking underground and use the first floor for active uses like retail and housing. And existing buildings will be able to convert unused parking spaces if they choose. This does not prohibit parking. It gives people the option to choose. Second, the legislation exempts buildings from minimum parking requirements if their sole street frontage is on a bike path or a dedicated transit lane. Again, this does not prohibit the construction of off-street parking. It simply gives people the option not to build or to convert it if they choose. An example, houses along the Oak and Fell Street bike lanes could now turn their garages into housing without needing a costly variance. We could actually create new rent-controlled housing out of unused garages. This code change can reduce conflicts and hazards on the city's bike and transit lanes, improving safety for bicyclists and travel time for Muni riders. And it can bring lower costs for homeowners and businesses. Third, the legislation allows exemptions from minimum parking requirements if doing so will improve an existing building's front, side, or rear yard. Parking minimums existed in the codes before many of the green spaces and yard requirements. So many building owners paved over their yards to create off-street parking. If people want to keep those spots, they can. But if they don't, the legislation will allow them to remove the spot and restore some green space to their homes and character to our neighborhoods. Lastly, the legislation authorizes the zoning administrator to grant certain exceptions from off-street parking requirements in residential mixed districts. This change simply allows some flexibility to reflect recent changes in the planning code and, again, give residents and business owners more options. I know parking can be a very controversial topic. This legislation is carefully crafted to provide people with options. Homeowners, businesses, and residents will have more say in how they use their property. And in the process, we can activate ground floor spaces, improve bicycle safety and Muni performance, and restore green spaces and yards. My second item today is a hearing request. 2 weeks ago, the Comptroller's Office, through the great work of Peg Stevenson and, of course, our Comptroller, Ben Rosenfield, released its annual citywide performance measurements report. If you haven't read it and you have 16 or 17 hours of free time, especially over our break, I highly encourage you to just at least skim through it. This report evaluates every city department from the MTA to the Academy of Sciences using a variety of performance metrics, many of which are unique to what the department does. So you can use the percentage of 311 calls answered within 60 seconds or the total number of training hours the Department of Human Resources delivered last year. The report shows the early impacts of the Federal Affordable Care Act as we see healthy San Francisco enrollment dropping considerably. We also see a dramatic increase in Muni-related crime, which likely speaks to the cell phone safety issues we have worked on here in Sacramento. here in Sacramento. And as a member of the Expanded Budget Committee, one thing that is most valuable to me is that this report can help us evaluate how or if our investments in staff and resources are actually paying off. So, for example, the police department's average response time to high priority calls dropped by 54 seconds from 2012-2013 to 2013-2014. With Mayor Lee's leadership, we have invested in many new police academy classes in the last few years. Likewise, this is evident that those investments are starting to bear fruit. Likewise, the report shows our park scores are improving, which is likely due in part to the voter-approved bonds. This is a fascinating report and guidepost for the work we do here during the budget process. And I want to, again, thank the Comptroller's Office for putting it together, and I look forward to hearing more about the work at our hearing. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Breed. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. I have a number of items, but I want to begin with an item. We've had some family members who have been waiting for a while to for me to do this in memoriam, and so with your indulgence, I would ask them if they can please come up and to the podium. Si pueden salir llegar al podio. They have a picture of a very special person for whom I'm doing an in memoriam today, and that's in the memory of Rosa Mena, and they have a picture of her. And with us today are Rebecca and Francisco, who are two of her kids. Rosa was born in Santa Ana, El Salvador, where she worked as a candy maker before coming to San Francisco in 1985 to start her new life with her children and sister. Rosa Mena was known as a vibrant, enthusiastic, and happy member of our District 9 community who let no barrier stand in her way. When she arrived, she spoke no English with only a first-grade education, but she was determined to be successful, and she immediately signed up for City College classes and soon was on her way. She spent 7 years taking English classes at City College and became a leader among her peers and helped countless people in the community learn English. In her later years, Rosa continued to be active and became an advocate for senior causes. Rosa would travel the state with her daughter Rebecca, a home care worker, educating and inspiring seniors to stay active. She was known for wearing vibrant colors and was the first one to get up and dance at a social event. She was also dedicated to art, and her art and expression were very important to her, and she even earned a certificate in filigrane paper making with her daughter a few years ago. Personally, she was like a mother to me, like a member of the family who has been supported throughout different political endeavors over the years. After her diagnosis of cancer in April of this year, she began radiation treatment in the South Bay. And as a testament to her strength, she was actually given a diploma, a certificate by her doctors and caregivers. At the age of 92, she was the oldest woman at the facility to ever complete the very harsh 2-week radiation treatment that she went through. Unfortunately, Rosa Mena lost her fight against cancer this week, but I remind everyone that she left very specific instructions that no one is to wear black at her funeral, because she wants to be remembered for her vibrancy and her love of color. Es para mí hoy un honor y con mucha tristeza hablar un poco de la señora Rosa Mena, y estamos aquí, tenemos a su hija Rebeca y a su hijo Francisco. Antes de venir a los Estados Unidos, Rosa Mena trabajó como alguien haciendo dulces en El Salvador. Es nativa de Santa Ana, El Salvador, y vino a este país en 1985 con sus hijos y su hermana. Rosa Mena fue una miembro vibrante y entusiástico de nuestra comunidad. Cuando llegó a los Estados Unidos no hablaba español y con solo la educación del primer año en El Salvador, ella estaba determinada a aprender inglés y se inscribió en el City College, donde estudió por varios años. En sus últimos años, en todos sus años, siempre fue un miembro activo de nuestra comunidad, luchando por los derechos de nuestros ancianos. La señora Rosa viajó por todo el estado con su hija Rebeca, abogando y educando a nuestros ancianos que se mantuvieran activos. De una forma personal para mí, ella fue como una miembro de mi familia, como una madre, y yo sé que muchos vamos a sentirla de menos en nuestra comunidad. También nos ha inspirado con su lucha en contra del cáncer, y a la edad de 92 fue la mujer de más avanzada edad que completó el tratamiento de radiación. Ella es sobrevivida por sus hijos Rebeca, Francisco, Anabel y Ana Leticia. If it's okay with my colleagues, I just want to let the family just say a brief couple of words.
Without objection, colleagues, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Quisiera dar la oportunidad, si quieren decir unas palabras cortas acerca de doña Rosa Mena.
Good afternoon. My name is Francisco Mena, Madam President and Board of Supervisors. I'd like to say that I'd like to thank you guys for the time you've given us today, especially Supervisor David Campos. I'd like to thank you for the hard work you guys do here. I know it's a very tough job, and there's a lot of energy to be here every day. My mother was a very dedicated woman to her family. Also, she was very politically involved. She used to go around and talk to people about political campaigns in the city. Also, she was a member of the union as a leader for the elders in San Francisco, UHW. And she participated in a lot of meetings and a lot of trips going to Sacramento and fight for the benefits of the elderly. So my mother was very dedicated for that, giving herself to help other people. I know everybody around the neighborhood will miss her. So I thank you for this opportunity. I know my mother's in a better place now, and I thank you for this moment.
Good afternoon. My name is Rebecca Rodriguez Parra. I would like to say a few words in this special place. It is an honor for us, especially for my brother, my sisters, and me, that David Campos mentioned to the name of my mother, Rosa Mena, who passed away 2 days ago for terminal cancer, and recognize her for the support in his political campaign. Thank you so much, David Campos. I appreciate you and my family. God bless you for everything that you help us. Thank you for the flower that you bring to my mother at home. My mother was very happy. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you, and may you rest in peace, Rosa Mena. Que descanse en paz, señora Rosa Mena. And our condolences to her family. I have a couple of other items that I want to also talk about, and I'll be as brief as I can. Today I will be introducing a resolution declaring December 10th Human Rights Day in San Francisco, and every year thereafter and let me say that I want to thank Supervisor Avalo, Supervisor Mar, Supervisor Yee for their co-sponsorship. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted by the United Nations in 1948 in the aftermath of worldwide depression and war. Eleanor Roosevelt spearheaded the writing of the strongly believed, for she strongly believed that within any society, the individual rights must be protected. This Declaration of Human Rights proclaims the inherent dignity and equal rights of all people. It asserts people's civil rights, freedom of speech, freedom from arbitrary detention, freedom from discrimination, and more. It asserts people's rights to the necessities of life, housing, healthcare, employment, and education. As Nelson Mandela stated on the 60th anniversary of this declaration, it is the foundation stone of all international human rights law and still holds enormous ethical value for all of us wherever in the world we happen to live. Tomorrow marks the 66th anniversary of the passage of this very important document, and at this moment in our city's and our nation's history, as we try even in 2014 to address issues around poverty, homelessness, inequality, racism, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is more relevant today than ever. I would like to thank the Gray Panthers of San Francisco for working with my office on this resolution, especially Patricia Jackson. The Gray Panthers will be leading a public reading of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights tomorrow on the steps of City Hall at noon, and everyone is welcome to come and join them. Lastly, I just want to say that I want to thank the Department of Public Works and the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission and the staff for working with my office on a very important and ongoing issue, which unfortunately may only get worse as the rain continues in San Francisco. Specifically, the geographic area of 17th and Folsom, and actually a couple of blocks around that area, is actually the lowest point in the city and county of San Francisco. And because of that distinction, it actually has, on a yearly basis, for as long as we remember, been flooded. And so we know that we expect additional rain in the next few days. And so I would simply take this opportunity to thank DPW and the PUC and to ask them and ask the mayor's office to please work with my office because there's a lot of frustration right now in the neighborhood. Many homes, many businesses have already been flooded, and we expect additional flooding to take place. And something as basic as simply having sandbags provided to the neighborhood, though I think that we may be actually running out of sandbags here in San Francisco. Ultimately, the city will have some responsibility as the flooding happens, and we're talking about not just hundreds of thousands, but millions of dollars in damage and damages. And so we have an opportunity tonight and in the next coming days to be proactive. And I know that the Department of Public Works, which is actually not responsible for the flooding that happens, but is very responsible and very responsive in addressing the flooding that takes place, has been very helpful in the past. And, simply ask that we provide whatever resources are needed by that department to continue to prevent the flooding in this neighborhood. The rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Cohen.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I am introducing legislation today for the city to officially acquire property at 66 Raymond Avenue, known to many as the Viz Valley Community Center. This legislation is a key step in allowing the city to have possession of a building and to make the needed improvements the space so desperately needs. This is very significant for many in D10, specifically in the Viz Valley community. For over 100 years, this building has been extremely important asset for the community, having served as a service and community hub for residents, for both young and old. We unfortunately lost the building to foreclosure last year, and it's been an extremely long road to get to where we are today. I'd like to thank the unwavering support of community members who have walked with me along this particular journey. This is not only just about reclaiming a building, but it's also about reclaiming the symbolic importance that this place holds within the community. The city's ownership of this particular building means that our residents will have a safe and healthy place to gather. We will be able to have a place for our families and children to thrive and to continue to thrive in Visitation Valley neighborhood. So thank you to the community members who've remained steadfast and dedicated to this vision. Also want to recognize John Updike and his team for helping facilitate this transaction. Also want to recognize the leadership within the mayor's office who has also been a part of this acquisition. I'm also introducing a hearing request on the city's food and beverage manufacturing and distribution sectors. Now, over the last few years, we've seen an incredible growth in this industry, and after many years of contraction. However, these businesses face hurdles when seeking to start, to grow, and to stay in San Francisco. And since being elected, I've focused on attracting and growing our city's manufacturing sector because they have an essential element to our diverse economy and employ San Francisco residents in traditional blue-collar jobs. Now, this hearing will recognize the critical role that the food and beverage industry plays in our community by discussing recommendations prepared by makers and movers of the Economic Cluster Strategy, which is a team made up of San Francisco Planning Department, the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, SPUR, and a steering committee of local businesses and nonprofit organizations. And then finally, in closing, I want to add my voice to the conversation that is happening across the country. I'm introducing a resolution for this body to continue to consider supporting the new guidance that has been recently released by the Obama administration limiting racial profiling by federal law enforcement officials. Now, the recent tragic incidents involving unarmed African American males and law enforcement officers have raised, obviously, it's a widespread concern and debate over the use of racial profiling in our criminal justice system. And these incidents point to a greater hurdle that we must overcome as a nation to rebuild trust and confidence between law enforcement and the communities they serve. Now, that's not to say that there is no trust, but it is to say that we have a lot of work to do. Racial profiling does just the opposite in instilling trust within the community. It has strong detrimental effects on a relationship between law enforcement agencies and the communities of colors, and it creates a climate where residents often do not feel safe in their own communities and are less likely to collaborate with law enforcement officials on important public safety issues. The new guidance for federal law enforcement officials is an important step that sets the model for local agencies to follow. Now, I think our police department and our law enforcement officials do a very good job of protecting and serving, but I also think that there is always room for improvement. And I also think it's upon us to set the standard for other municipalities across the country. San Francisco should definitely take a stand in supporting this guidance and calling on all law enforcement agencies to enact similar regulations so that everyone can truly begin to feel safe in and protected by law enforcement regardless of their color of their skin. Madam Clerk, the rest I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Cohen. Supervisor Farrell. Okay. Supervisor Kim.
Thank you. I want to echo my colleagues in their grief and also outrage about the continued loss of the life of our young African American men and also other men of color nationwide. I think over the past 2 weeks, while many of us were on break, there is nothing more heart-wrenching than reading the news every day and reading another report of something that happened that is unjust and also creating more distrust in our communities, particularly around issues of race. And the peaceful and nonviolent protesters that have put the voices of Black Lives Matter on the national radar continue to make a powerful impression in our righteous push for justice. While there isn't one answer, and it's not as simple as an indictment or a special prosecutor, I think we can all agree that change cannot happen without massive organized appeals for justice. And as a former youth organizer that has spent a lot of time in our schools and our communities throughout San Francisco, I continue to be committed to find ways to get weapons off of our city streets. And there's nothing harder in my time on the Board of Supervisors than attending a funeral of a young person, no matter who or how that person was killed, usually from violence. And the toughest moment when family members or parents ask me what we can do to end this type of violence. In the most recent homicide in our district over the summer in the south of Market, our office began conversations with several of our youth programs about what we can do, even in cases where a young person was able to get a job, was able to get housing, was able to get his or her life on track. To lose their life to violence is incredibly distressing. And often the answer that we come to is that we need less guns on our streets. This Saturday, on the second anniversary of the Sandy Hook Elementary School massacre, the South of Market community will be hosting a gun buyback at the United Players Clubhouse in the South of Market, a building which we recently worked to secure for the community as a small site community facility acquisition. Last year, I was approached by Brendan Hallinan of the Hallinan & Hallinan law firm about the possibility of approaching several of his clients who had funded a gun buyback program in Oakland to elevate the critical issue of disarmament. Many of his clients were medical marijuana club clients who wanted to give back into the community. It may be considered a unique and unorthodox approach to violence prevention, but after many conversations and learning of the work that happened, I was impressed that a small group of local small businesses would take it upon themselves to demonstrate a commitment to solutions to inner city violence. To that end, United Players has worked with the Green Door, Grassroots, and Barbary Coast MCDs, all located in District 6, along with Brendan's law firm, who has contributed $35,000 to provide the funds necessary to buy back illegal firearms from our streets, and they've now fundraised close to $100,000. The buyback will take place this Saturday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. at 1038 Howard Street at United Players Clubhouse. Anyone turning in a handgun will receive $100, assault weapons, $200 in compensation, with no questions asked. After the buyback, the community will join the San Francisco Million March in lieu of a vigil that they were originally planning to commemorate the Sandy Hook massacre at UN Plaza in the afternoon. I want to thank our local District 6 medical marijuana dispensaries. I want to thank United Players for their leadership in doing all the fundraising to make this possible, as well as Commander Mike Redmond, who is our former captain at Southern Station, for his support in helping us to navigate the logistical and permitting issues of putting this on. And of course, Rudy Corpus and Misha Olivas from UP for their ongoing work to wipe out violence in our community, to build relationships between opposing sides, and empower our communities to take back our community. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of questions that I think we look to solve, but I look forward to working with my colleagues on this varied issues of violence. And the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Let me ask colleagues if you'll join me in closing the meeting in honor of an Asian American arts activist from the Richmond District and longtime friend of mine, Val Chow. He was a member of 18 Mighty Mountain Warriors, a writer, artist, as some called him, a gentle soul, a Marine, but an activist that really supported the Asian American Theater Company and many of the groundbreaking organizations in the Asian American arts movement. I met him through the Asian American Theater Company over 30 years ago when they were housed in the Richmond District on Arguello and Clement. Val Chow was a dedicated son, brother, uncle, active community activist, and true friend to those who knew him until he unexpectedly passed away on November 27th this year. He was a native San Franciscan born November 8th, 1959. He grew up in the outer Richmond and attended the local schools After graduating from Washington High School, he attended college at UC Davis and joined the Marines. He was a dedicated staff member for the Legion of Honor and the DeYoung Museum in the Richmond District in Golden Gate Park. Val was also an active member of the community and participated in groups like the Asian Express Toastmasters Club, and a lot of the work of other friends of mine in the 18 Mighty Mountain Warriors, I think, was one of his proud accomplishments, working with them as a writer, but also doing a lot of the behind-the-scenes work for many Asian American arts groups. He also supported the Richmond District Neighborhood Center and many other organizations, food programs, and the AIDS Walk. He also has been a strong backer and supporter of Tomiko Wong and the Oakland Asian Cultural Center as well. Val affected all those that he met with his love, laughter, and unselfish giving. We're grateful to have had him in our lives, and he will always have a special place in each of our hearts. Val's family is planning to hold an intimate memorial service honoring his life, remembering his work, his laughter, his giving, this coming Saturday, December 13th, from 10 to 12:30 at the DeYoung Museum's Piazzoni Murals Room. Please join us if you can. That's in Golden Gate Park. For more information, or I should say condolences to Leilani, Cecily, and his family, and everybody that he supported with Aperture, the Asian American Theater Company, and the Asian American Theater Company, and our various arts movements in our communities. If you want more information on the memorial and how to acknowledge his work, his sister Leilani Chow Boutelier can be reached at 415-821-2956, or you can go to his Facebook page to post remembrances of Val. It's his Facebook page that's under Valiant Chow, V-A-L-I-A-N-T Chow, C-H-O-W. Thank you. The rest I'll submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I have several items for introduction. First is a hearing that I want to thank my co-sponsor for the hearing, Supervisor David Campos. The hearing will be on revenue options for our affordable housing crisis in San Francisco. We all know that in 2012 we passed at the ballot Prop C, but Prop C, our Housing Trust Fund, only provides some minimal support to getting at our enormous housing affordability crisis. And so I think new options should be on the table, and I want to work with the Mayor's Office of Housing to explore, and possibly the Comptroller's Office, explore what housing options there might be, what revenue options there might be for affordable housing. These could include general obligation bonds, something I talked about a few years back before Prop C was passed, infrastructure financing districts, the use of city budget reserves possibly, and other options to meet our affordable housing crisis. So hope to have that at the same time as I have the hearing on options for distressed mortgages in San Francisco as well. I also am requesting a committee of the whole hearing for the reappointment of Wendy Paskin Jordan to the San Francisco Retirement Board. I'm hoping we can do that for next week. She's currently in this quasi-official position on the retirement board. Both Wendy Paskin Jordan and Victor Macris's terms on the retirement board expired on February 20th, 2014. Macris was reappointed on March 27th. On April 3rd, a complaint against Paskin Jordan was filed with the Ethics Commission. On December 4th, Mayor Lee swore in Paskin Jordan for a new 5-year term on the retirement board. However, the city attorney advised us that the oath of office Paskin Jordan took on December 4th is not effective because the board was never notified of her reappointment. On December 8th, yesterday, the mayor notified the Board of Supervisors about the reappointment. Charter Section 3.100 gives the board 30 days to reject the appointment to the retirement board. To me, the timing is suspicious. Why did the mayor wait 9 months to reappoint her? Is it just a coincidence that the 30-day window for the board to reject the appointment will expire on January 7th, one day before the board's first scheduled meeting in 2015? This is essentially a recess appointment where the board has very little time to consider it. Therefore, I am motioning a committee of the whole for next week's board meeting on her reappointment. It's also important to note that we have to be really cognizant that we should not just be rubber stamping appointments. In March 2013, the Board of Supervisors approved the appointment of Mel Murphy by a 7-4 vote, despite serious questions of his failure to obtain permits and pay fees for his construction projects. Murphy said as a commissioner, he should be held to a higher standard, but explained his permit violations as an oversight. But then in December of 2013, the mansion he was building at 25 Crown Terrace collapsed and slid down the hill. DBI found that the construction was dramatically different than the approved plan. Last week, Murphy was cited for illegally reinstalling car parking elevators after he had them removed in order to get DBI to sign off on his condos on 26th Street. It seems clear that this board has failed to scrutinize Murphy's appointment closely enough. We shouldn't be doing that with Wendy Paskin-Jordan. So therefore, colleagues, I hope you join me next week in reviewing her appointment to the retirement board at a committee of the whole hearing. I also have, what else do I have here? I have some cleanup language for the Children, Youth, and Their Families Oversight and Advisory Committee, which I'm submitting as well. The rest I submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Supervisor Marr asked to be re-referred.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, I'm making a motion today to hold a committee of the whole on the issue of the impacts of growing labor unrest at the San Francisco airport. I'll be asking our president to work with me to ensure that we have a committee of the whole. The impacts of potential labor unrest, if it led to a strike at the airport and the 1,000 workers that are the hardworking workers at the airport, it may have a horrible impact economically on the city during the holiday time. So I'm urging colleagues and our president to support a committee of the whole for next Tuesday's meeting, December 16th. And I'll be submitting the language to the clerk within the deadline that we're required. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Seeing Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. I just want to say that I will be co-sponsoring the motion by Supervisor Marr. I want to thank him and his staff, as well as Carolyn Guzin in my office. I think it's important for us to at least have the possibility of having a committee of the whole next week. Maybe it won't be needed, but I think that we need to be ready to have a conversation in the event that there's no resolution at a very important labor dispute that's happening at the airport.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Farrell.
Thank you. And colleagues, this is something that there was a contract that came before us last week at our budget committee where this issue was raised by some people in public comment and digging through the issue further. I think this is a good thing to put as a placeholder. Hopefully there's a resolution. We don't have to have this hearing, but I think it's a good thing. And thank you, Supervisor Marr, for putting this forward.
Thank you, Supervisor Farrell. Seeing no other names on the roster, Madam President, that concludes roll call for the introduction of new business.
Thank you. At this time, Madam Clerk, why don't we go to general public comment?
At this time, the public may comment generally for up to 2 minutes on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board, including any comments on the minutes or the immediate adoption calendar, items 49 through 53. Public comment is not allowed on items which have already been subject to public comment at a board committee. Please direct your remarks to the board as a whole and not to individual supervisors nor to the audience. Speakers using translation assistance will be allowed twice the amount of time to testify, and if you would like a document to be displayed on the overhead projector, please clearly state such to SFG TV and then remove the document when you'd like the screen to return to live coverage of the meeting. First speaker, please.
Petition for redress of grievances with the Congress of the United States, resolution of the City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors calling for the rescission of House Joint Resolution 114 in the 107th Congress, authorizes President to use armed force in the United States as he determines to be necessary based on lies about WMDs in Iraq. Whereas by our Constitution for the United States of America, we the people ordain Congress to declare war and to call the President into actual service of the United States to execute a declaration of war as a Commander-in-Chief. Whereas on October 10th and 11th, 2002, 373 members of the 107th Congress, including elected California public officers Karen Bass, Ken Calvert, Dianne Feinstein, Daryl Issa, Buck McEwen, Gary Miller, Dana Rochabacher, Edward Royce, Adam Schiff, Brad Sherman, and Henry Waxman authorized President to use the armed forces of the United States as he determines to be necessary, evading a resolution to declare war by the armed forces as he determines to be necessary, order to give aid and comfort criminal profiteers sponsor at the expense danger to we the betrayed people. Whereas every member of Congress and public officer under the United States bound by oath of office and public employment contract to support and defend this Constitution for the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. Whereas a direct result of duly elected California public officers, 750 God-fearing dead Americans have been deprived of their lives without due process of a resolution of Congress to declare war.
Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker, please.
And their survivors and other California taxpayers have been robbed of $209,420 million by 7 Congresses. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the San Francisco Board of Supervisors hereby petitions our representatives to Congress, Dianne Feinstein, Barbara Boxer, and Nancy Pelosi, to make every effort to initiate and support the rescission of House Joint Resolution 114-107 in the 113th Congress. Such rescission will render Public Law 107-243 that authorizes the armed forces as one man determines to be necessary null and void. I have heard you this afternoon talk about I Can't Breathe, a video shown to a grand jury that show without doubt the murder of an unarmed man for selling a cigarette, police homicides, yakety yak. This country's in big trouble. It's in big debt, funding, now 6 undeclared wars as a result of this martial law 107-243, including and 751 Californians have been lynched without due process of law under this law. If you'd like to help we the people fix this country and restore constitutional government, restore the Constitution, which has been aborted by this law, and end a police state, please consider this petition for redress of grievances. We've emailed it to you. I'm going to fax it to you again tomorrow, and it'd be wonderful if you make an agenda item for next week.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Peter Alexander Cherniff, good day. I agree that there is nothing more heart-wrenching than acknowledging the most vicious racists who are those who maintain the daily 14 million murdered sentients terrorized in the slaughterhouse every day. It's the religions that centuries ago altered the definition of murder to exclude animals. And law enforcement, locally and nationwide, are far kinder to the public than the public are to animals. For those that are purchasing crab, dairy, and seafood, I highly recommend you get a Geiger counter, for they have been running hot radioactive-wise for about 2 years, thanks to Fukushima and Monsanto terraforming projects called chemtrails. And I've also witnessed, and according to military statistics, The military has been assaulted from 1992 to today. 3.4 million vets are dead by the military vaccines created by those serving the Fed. And now law enforcement is set to be assaulted by the bankers' Fed. Over the last 33 years, 247 sheriffs and police whistleblowers have been murdered quite dead. And why are there 22,000 FEMA four-person coffins in the Bay Area? Harley riders far from the norm, they be the riders on the storm. They be bronze lions setting upon granite. They be the bikers, the baddest on the planet. More than a rumor, these cats been purring to actions, commands that set them stirring. The big picture seen by the regal eagle soaring, shared unto the pride and set them roaring. Packs of banker hyenas have done more than hassle. They're storming the high ground, so to the castle. And ever-present lawyerly jackals do always harass. The 40-day general strike be kicking their class. All Harley riders, take off your disguise. Become almighty warriors with fire in your eyes. Shut down this system, so too their supplies. I am that I am, so too weary of their lies. The bottom line is to shut down the lawyers.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
People travel a long way just to get 2 minutes. You guys make everybody wait, and everybody's tired of the lawyers and their manipulations, including the law enforcement.
SFG TV.
I'll have to turn this on here. How do you focus it? For me, Peter?
I don't know how to do that. I have no idea.
You know, I broke my glasses today, so I don't know. Maybe you can help. I don't have that.
Sir, your time is ticking.
Officer, could you help me focus this? I broke my glasses today, so yeah. Well, the book is called The Franklin Cover-Up, and it's all true. And you were blessed with the presence of Doug Millar, who's worked with the author, Senator DeCamp, for 20-plus years on several occasions, and you were not worthy to hear him. But it's about Satanism and child abuse and murder in Nebraska. And if I was to read this book in the presence of Alicia Owen and Paul Benassi, they would rejoice, because they're words of truth, and we are all made in God's image. But if I was to read it in the presence of former Chief of Police Bob Wadman in Omaha, Nebraska, and his good bud Nick O'Hare in the FBI, who's the head of the FBI, or was in those days, in Omaha, Nebraska, he'd actually rather be bit by a lion. And when David wrote in Psalm 22 about Christ's crucifixion, they pierced my hands and my feet like a lion. They gaped upon me with their mouths as a ravening and a roaring lion. The reason why it was so awful to die on that cross was because the words that they were speaking were words of truth. He was the Son of God, and he was very tempted to come down off of that cross. But if Jesus came off of the cross, man could not be saved. You know, the book of Romans says that God might be just and the justifier of him that believes in Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the only way of salvation.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
This thing isn't on right now. It's flashing. Is there somebody who knows?
Media is on their way. We're starting your time, Mr. Warfield.
You know, I don't think it's appropriate to start the time of people who are just trying to show you something and your machinery is not working. I'd appreciate starting at the beginning.
Mr. Warfield, we can actually see your document from the screen, so if you would
That's
like
right,
to proceed.
and it's 1:30 already. A quarter of my time is gone. Is that how you want to run it? People spend a whole afternoon to get here, and then you mess them up with machinery that doesn't work. Thanks very much. One wonders what the point is with talking to the Board of Supervisors who, for example, are reading newspapers, walking around, and so on, while the public, presumably that they're supposed to be serving, is trying to get 2 minutes of public comment. I'm here to talk about the library's imminent installation next month of a very privacy-threatening technology, which I think all of you should be and public would be concerned about. It's called BiblioCommons, and it was presented to the Library Commission only as a request to approve a change to the library's privacy policy. In fact, it's a major hole in that policy. It allows BiblioCommons, the software company, to change the terms at any time without notice to the public or the library, and then assumes agreement by the users if they continue using it. It exploits children by collecting information from them and the public to sell and in other ways use in any way that they want. There's censorship that's not been discussed until questions were asked at the commission meeting. There's no clarity about the cost. Only when asked did the library staff say it would cost $1 million over a period of 5 years.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, President Tong and other victims of the cabal. My name is Christopher Dahl, and I live at 6th and Howard, currently 10 blocks and 14 meters from sea level. I rise to comment on how to make it your new board regime much more effective. First, I would like to share with all of you how useful I have found the 2-minute limit on public comment time. Learning to constrain my thoughts and expressions to fit into this very short period has taught me to be careful with my words, to be precise, to be clear. If members would confine their remarks in commendation to this limit, hopefully the result would be more inspiring than the sometimes obscure narrative it has turned out to be. I would also suggest that the same refinement be applied to in memoriam. Not only would your words more closely resemble real oratory, but you might also have more time to memorialize the otherwise forgotten tens of people who die every week in our beloved city and county of San Francisco. I would also ask that there be no future celebration in any fashion of any athletic concussion entertainment industry feeder system before the board. I refer, of course, to prep school football and similar activities. Finally, please note, President Tong, that any future references by myself to any member of this body are entirely rhetorical. That is, such references are description and dissection, not discussion. Thank you, President Tong.
Good evening, audience and the supervisors and listening audience that don't have but 2 minutes. It used to be 3 minutes because we came up here, it's down to 2 minutes. We're going to try to have some kind of legislation to bring it back up to 3 minutes. But first of all, I want to congratulate Madam Chair, as the President's there in the helm. I know you're going to do a wonderful job. I want to congratulate the Queen from the East Side, Cohen, for doing a wonderful job out there in the Southeast, and all the rest and the ones that lost. But I'm here to make a special announcement to the city and county of San Francisco. I've been coming up here for over 25 years. I analyzed and visualized everything that's been going on. It's been a change, game change. As soon as you get to what's happening in the city, they do the game change. I'll also like to give honor to my Supervisor London Breed. I'm talking to her about doing some very historical meetings in the upcoming year, of having some accountability hearings with the department heads and CBOs that's in my community. I'm happy to announce that I took the position. I don't need your permission. I am the Fillmore Corridor Ambassador. I'm going to do the things the CAC, the CBD was supposed to do in my community and put the unity in my community. But see, I'm in a very historical place. I'm trying to put historical value in the black community as well as the city government. See, the mayor has a problem with one of our prestigious leaders, Reverend Brown. And because of Reverend Brown used to be with the Housing Authority and he can't get in there to see the mayor, well, I'm going to put it all out there with my year-end report. I'm going to talk about faces and places that I've been dealing with for a year. I'm coming out with my own new publication, so I want to get up here and only speak 1 minute. I'm coming back to City Hall in the press room, so yours truly, Ace on the Case, will be over here in the Southeast and Fillmore at City Hall. I'm going to be doing it all, more than 3 minutes. But I'm going to tell y'all, we as African Americans, black Negroes here in San Francisco, are in a state of emergency, and my primary objective is to save the generations that's underneath me. Thank you very much. May God bless us all.
Tom Gilberti, 2000 South Beach Marina Apartments. Last time I was here, I was cutting pumpkin pie. It was a metaphor. If you can see it right, it was the sale of a 4-unit apartment building, and I'm wanting that the renters get a stake of the pie at the point of sale. And this is kind of what we were cutting. The landlord would get a little bit of a hit, like a third. In this case, it comes out to a third. Landlord gets 2/3. The renters get more than nothing. Maybe we can do something nice for the landlords. They have a 1031 tax deferral, federal. Maybe we could set a program in the city that instead of losing any tax by not reinvesting 2 years into another rental, maybe they can hold on to that money and keep it so that we kind of mitigate the loss that they're losing, but we're spreading the wealth around. More people, it happens, get to share in it. Instead of being vulnerable and scared when your property turns, we're taking a little bit more of the speculators' money and we're passing it around so this way people can make an escape, maybe find another place to live. I think it helps more people. Now, if we had a mayor that came down and said that they'd like this to happen, would you work with him or her? Thank you. Happy holidays.
Any other members of the public who wish to speak on general public comment? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. Madam Clerk, if we could go to our adoption without committee reference agenda.
Items 49 through 53 are being considered for immediate adoption without committee reference.
Would any supervisors like to sever any items? Supervisor Avalos.
Item 50, please.
Item 50, and I would like to request that we sever item 49. Madam Clerk, item 49, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, let's go to the balance of the adoption without committee reference agenda.
On items 51 through 53, Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. There are 10 ayes.
Those motions are approved. And item 49.
Item 49 is a resolution to declare the results of the November 4th, 2014 consolidated general election.
Thank you, colleagues. I just have a quick typo to correct here in the election results, the declaration on page 4, line 7. There was a misstatement that the BART district was District 8Z. I'm just making a motion to strike out the letter Z so that it simply says District 8. So, colleagues, if I can take that amendment, a motion to second that, seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Without objection, the amendment is adopted. And on balance of 49 as amended. If we could take that same house, same call, without objection, that resolution is adopted as amended unanimously. Item 50, please.
Item 50 is a resolution to urge the Department of Justice to expedite its investigations related to the events in Ferguson, Missouri.
Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is submit an amendment of the whole for this resolution and then continue this item till next week's board meeting. And of course, this resolution was originally about Ferguson, Missouri, but things have changed a lot since then. So that's what I'll be doing. And I want to thank co-sponsors, Supervisors Campos, Cohen and Kim, and Mar for your support on this resolution. And I'm going to read a bit of it into the record. It might take a second. I see people are standing up, but without further ado. So this is a new resolution affirming the San Francisco Board of Supervisors' commitment to equal justice under the law and the First Amendment right to protest, recognizing the United States' broken and racially biased police and justice systems, and urging the Department of Justice, Congress, and President Obama to review national policing and judicial practices to truly bring equal justice under the law. And you've all received a copy of this new resolution. I will not read the whole thing. I've actually shared it with our police chief, Greg Sir, and we will be, this is for right now a work in progress, but I don't think it's going to change very much between now and next week, and I really hope to have your consideration at next week's board meeting for this resolution. This past weekend, I was in New York City. Actually, I arrived around 9:30 on Wednesday evening, and the verdict about Eric Gardner and Daniel Pantaleo, who had held and killed Eric Gardner, had just come out. It was a really dramatic place to be, a very historic moment in New York City at the time. On Thursday, I had gone to a demonstration in the Foley Square, which is close to City Hall, and the place was packed with thousands and thousands of people, elected officials, family members. There was a woman I met. She had 2 kids who were under the age of 4 whose father had just been killed accidentally by New York City police officer. He was scared going into a public housing site, and it seems like all around the country we've witnessed the protests going on. People who have lost faith in our police departments and our justice system as a nation. And so this resolution is addressing that and looking at San Francisco, what we could do better. I believe San Francisco is not the same as Ferguson and even New York City. We do things a bit better at the moment, but I think it's important to build on that and also call upon changes at the national level. So that's what this resolution is about, and colleagues, I hope to have your support next week.
Thank you. Supervisor Avalos has submitted an amendment of the whole. Is there a second to that? Seconded by Supervisor Breed. Can we take that without objection to accept those? Without objection, those amendments are accepted. And if we can get a second to the motion to continue this item to December 16th, seconded by Supervisor Marr. And without objection, this item is continued until our December 16th board meeting. And with that, Madam Clerk, can you please read the in memoriams?
Yes, today's meeting will be adjourned in memory of the following individuals. On behalf of Supervisor Campos, for the late Ms. Rosa Mena. On behalf of Supervisor Marr, for the late Mr. Valiant Chow. And at the suggestion of Supervisor Tang, on behalf of the entire Board of Supervisors, for the late Jennifer Antine Matz.
Thank you, and I would like to thank our SFGov TV staff for today, Jennifer Lowe and Jonathan Stockus. And Madam Clerk, is there any other further business before us today?
That concludes our business for today.
Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.